Tonight you are about to step into a forgotten world long before civilization, where every night could be your last. The sun has already slipped below the horizon. Shadows stretch across the grasslands, forests and rocky valleys swallowing every familiar landmark until only faint silhouettes remain. Somewhere nearby an owl calls into the darkness. Farther away something much larger answers with a low distant growl. You do not know exactly what waits beyond the firelight, but surprisingly the greatest danger may not have teeth at all, because tomorrow morning you will have to eat. How would you know whether the bright red berries hanging from a branch will satisfy your hunger or quietly stop your heart? Why does one root nourish an entire family, while another almost identical beneath the soil leaves no second chance? And perhaps the greatest mystery of all, how did the very first humans ever discover what was safe to eat when no one had written a guide? No elder had yet learned the lesson, and every meal carried the possibility of becoming the last. Tonight you'll wander through a world where every leaf deserves suspicion, every unfamiliar fruit demands patience, and every successful meal represents generations of observation, memory, courage, and sometimes heartbreaking mistakes. Along the way, you'll discover that our ancestors were not simply lucky survivors. They became careful scientists without laboratories, quiet naturalists without books, and remarkably patient students of a landscape that rewarded attention far more often than bravery alone. The answers are more surprising than you might imagine. Some came from watching clever animals, others emerged beside glowing campfires. Still others survived only because stories travelled farther than footsteps passing from one generation to the next beneath star-filled skies. As always, this journey isn't about racing through history. It's about slowing down enough to notice the small details that shaped human lives long before cities' kingdoms or written language. The scent of crushed herbs beneath your feet, the rough bark beneath your fingertips, the crackle of damp wood in the evening air, the quiet relief of discovering that today's meal has left everyone healthy enough to greet another sunrise. Before we step deeper into the darkness of tonight's story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more calming historical journeys. And while you're settling in, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Leave a comment with your location and your local time. It's always wonderful to see just how many corners of the modern world gather together to explore these ancient ones. Now dim the lights. Section 1. The last traces of daylight fade behind distant hills, and you stand quietly beside a small fire whose flickering light barely reaches beyond a circle of stones. The warmth brushes your face, but the world beyond remains uncertain. Every sound seems sharper after sunset. Crickets sing from the grasses, leaves whisper as a cool breeze slips between scattered trees. Somewhere in the darkness, an unseen animal moves with patient confidence. It belongs here. You are still learning. Tomorrow hunger will wake before the sun. Unlike the people of the modern world, you cannot open a cupboard or stroll through a marketplace. Every meal begins with a question that carries real weight. What can you safely place into your mouth? The answer is never guaranteed, and no painted sign points toward the correct choice. You glance across the landscape with fresh eyes. Bushes are covered in berries of different colours. Thick vines disappear into tangled undergrowth. Broad leaves catch the fading light while strange mushrooms push through damp patches beneath fallen logs. The earth itself promises hidden treasures, with roots and bulbs sleeping beneath layers of soil. It all looks inviting. That is precisely the problem. Nature rarely announces which gifts come without hidden costs. Some fruits offer sweet energy, others hide powerful toxins behind bright colours or pleasant flavours. A root that resembles yesterday's dinner may carry chemicals capable of making your body desperately ill. Even clean-looking water can conceal dangers invisible to human eyes. You do not know any of this yet. Instead, you rely on something much older than certainty. You pay attention. Every step through this ancient world becomes an act of careful observation. Your eyes linger on tiny details that modern people might overlook completely. Which plants seem untouched by the insects? Which branches have been stripped clean by birds? Which patches of ground show signs that others have visited before? Nothing escapes notice for long. The air carries the earthy scent of damp moss, mixed with crushed grass beneath your feet. Your fingers brush against rough bark as you steady yourself on uneven ground. Tiny seeds cling to your clothing. The evening breeze carries faint aromas of flowering shrubs, rich soil and distant smoke from another family's fire, somewhere beyond the trees. This landscape speaks constantly. You simply have to learn its language. Long before writing classrooms or scientific journals, human survival depended upon reading countless silent clues. A broken branch might reveal where animals had been feeding. Fresh footprints pressed into soft mud could lead toward water. Half-eaten fruit scattered beneath a tree might suggest abundance, although not necessarily safety. The distinction matters enormously. At first glance, it seems almost impossible that anyone could have survived long enough to build entire communities under such conditions. After all, the prehistoric world contained thousands of edible plants, but also countless poisonous ones. Some caused only mild stomach pain. Others attacked the nervous system or damaged vital organs with frightening efficiency. Yet humans endured. More remarkably, they flourished. One reason lies in something deeply woven into the human mind: curiosity balanced by caution. Our ancestors were naturally interested in unfamiliar foods, but they were rarely reckless without reason. Extreme hunger sometimes forced dangerous choices, yet ordinary days rewarded patience far more than boldness. Historians and archaeologists broadly agree that prehistoric diets were extraordinarily diverse, varying with climate, geography, and season. A family living beside tropical rivers gathered very different foods than hunters crossing icy tundra or foragers wandering dry grasslands. There was never a single prehistoric menu. Instead, there existed thousands of local traditions, each shaped by the landscape itself. That diversity became one of humanity's greatest strengths. You notice an older member of your group kneeling beside a patch of low plants. There is no rush in the movement. Careful fingers separate leaves one by one before selecting only a few. Nothing is harvested randomly. Every choice reflects experience accumulated over many seasons. You watch silently. The lesson begins without words. Perhaps the elder gently rubs a leaf between weathered fingertips before lifting it toward the nose. Perhaps the scent alone offers reassurance, reminding everyone of successful meals shared countless evenings before. Or perhaps an unusual smell encourages quiet restraint until another season. Knowledge often arrives this slowly. Modern science has revealed that many plants produce defensive chemicals to discourage hungry animals. Bitterness frequently signals the presence of compounds that plants evolved for protection. Although bitterness alone does not guarantee danger. Many perfectly nutritious foods taste slightly bitter, while certain poisonous species disguise themselves behind surprisingly pleasant flavors. Nature enjoys breaking its own rules. Your ancestors gradually discovered this through experience rather than chemistry. Imagine walking through a meadow filled with dozens of unfamiliar species. Without books or field guides, every leaf appears equally mysterious. Shapes overlap, colors repeat. Tiny differences become matters of survival. A stem that bends instead of snapping. A flower with 5 petals rather than 6. Fine hairs covering one leaf but not another. Such details become unforgettable, not because someone demands memorization, because forgetting carries consequences. You begin noticing how the older gatherers rarely travel with wandering attention. Their eyes constantly scan ahead downward and sideways. They pause often. Sometimes they collect only a handful of plants after an entire morning. Efficiency means little if certainty disappears. Better fewer meals than fatal mistakes. The wisdom sounds obvious today. It was earned slowly. Around you, children imitate these careful movements. They reach eagerly toward colourful berries until gentle hands redirect them towards safer choices. No angry scolding follows. Instead, patient repetition shapes memory. The same safe plants appear again and again until recognition becomes instinctive. Learning starts remarkably young. Anthropologists studying recent hunter-gatherer societies have observed children spending years gradually acquiring detailed ecological knowledge from parents, grandparents, and other experienced community members. Although no living society perfectly represents prehistoric humanity, these observations offer valuable glimpses into how practical survival skills may have been passed from one generation to another. The classroom has no walls. Every walk becomes a lesson. Every meal becomes an examination. The fire behind you crackles softly as darkness deepens. Sparks drift upward like tiny stars searching for the heavens. Smoke carries the comforting scent of burning wood mixed with roasting meat from an earlier hunt. It settles gently into your clothing, becoming as familiar as your own skin. Safety feels temporary, but welcome. As the evening grows quieter, you begin to appreciate another remarkable truth. Human beings rarely face these challenges alone. Survival depended less upon individual brilliance than shared memory. One person's successful discovery became everyone else's opportunity. One person's painful mistake became knowledge that protected future generations. Memory itself became food. Stories carried recipes before recipes existed. Warnings traveled farther than footprints. Researchers still debate exactly how early humans balanced cautious experimentation with inherited tradition when exploring unfamiliar environments. The archaeological record preserves bones, tools, and ancient plant remains, yet the countless conversations around prehistoric fires disappeared into the night air long ago. We can reconstruct parts of the story, but many intimate moments remain beautifully beyond reach. Perhaps that mystery makes the journey even richer. You settle closer to the warmth as the stars slowly multiply overhead. The familiar plants gathered today rest nearby, ready for tomorrow's meal. Unknown ones remain untouched beyond the edge of the firelight, waiting patiently for another season, another observation, or another generation to understand them. There is no hurry. History itself was built this way, one careful choice after another. Long before humanity learned to build monuments, write laws, or chart the heavens, people mastered something even more fundamental. They learned that survival belonged not to the strongest or the fastest, but often to those willing to slow down, notice the smallest details, and respect a world that offered generous gifts only to careful students. Tomorrow your education continues. The forest is waiting. The questions have only just begun. Section 2. Morning arrives quietly, not with an alarm, but with birdsong drifting through cool air and pale sunlight slipping between scattered branches. Dew clings to every blade of grass, soaking your bare feet as you leave the warmth of last night's fire. The smoke still hangs faintly above the campsite, carrying the comforting scent of charred wood mixed with damp earth. Your stomach reminds you why you have awakened. Food waits somewhere beyond the trees. You are not the only creature searching. Almost immediately, the forest begins revealing its morning routine. Small birds dart through shrubs with remarkable confidence, plucking tiny berries almost too quickly for your eyes to follow. A squirrel disappears up an oak, carrying something hidden between its teeth. In the distance, deer move slowly through an open meadow, lowering their heads toward fresh shoots that have appeared after recent rain. Every animal seems certain. You are not. So you watch. Long before people understood biology, chemistry, or nutrition, observation became one of humanity's greatest survival tools. The natural world functioned as a vast living classroom, and every creature inside it offered lessons worth considering. You did not need to understand why an animal preferred one plant over another. You only needed to notice that it did. The forest was constantly teaching. Whether humans interpreted the lessons correctly was another matter. You crouch beside a patch of bushes where several small birds have gathered. Their feathers shimmer briefly as sunlight catches them. They hop from branch to branch with effortless precision, selecting only certain berries while leaving many others untouched. That catches your attention. If birds ignore those bright fruits, perhaps there is a reason. Or perhaps not. Nature enjoys making simple ideas wonderfully complicated. Many modern people imagine that prehistoric humans simply copied whatever animals ate. The reality was far more careful. Watching wildlife offered valuable clues but never guaranteed safety. A berry perfectly harmless to a thrush might contain chemicals that make a human dangerously ill. Deer happily consume plants that would upset the human digestive system. Rabbits nibble leaves that people wisely avoid. The lesson is subtle. Animals provide hints, not instructions. You begin noticing patterns rather than isolated moments. One bird may choose a single berry by chance. 20 birds returning day after day suggest something more meaningful. Observation works best when repeated, and repetition demands patience. Patience becomes a survival skill. Nearby, a troop of monkeys chatters noisily in the trees, stripping fruit from high branches before tossing unwanted pieces onto the forest floor. Some disappear into their mouths immediately. Others receive careful inspection first. Even animals, it seems, do not treat every meal casually. Their movements fascinate you. Hands remarkably similar to your own peel skins, twist stems, and break open hard shells. For a brief moment, the distance between human and animal feels surprisingly small. Scientists believe our ancient ancestors likely paid close attention to the behavior of neighboring species, especially other primates whose diets often overlapped with their own. Watching chimpanzees, baboons, or monkeys could have provided useful information about seasonal fruits, edible leaves, or hidden water sources. Useful, never perfect. One remarkable modern observation comes from chimpanzees that occasionally swallow rough leaves whole instead of chewing them. Researchers suspect this behavior helps remove intestinal parasites. Early humans may have witnessed similar habits, although historians still debate whether such observations directly influenced prehistoric medicinal knowledge or developed independently through human experimentation. The possibility remains fascinating. Perhaps someone noticed. Perhaps nobody did. The evidence has disappeared into time. A cool breeze rustles overhead, filling the air with the soft hiss of thousands of moving leaves. Sunlight dances across the ground, creating shifting patches of brightness that hide and reveal tiny details with every passing moment. You kneel beside fresh hoofprints pressed into damp soil. They belong to deer. The tracks wander toward a clearing where delicate green shoots push through dark earth. You examine the plants carefully. The deer clearly enjoyed them. Does that mean you should? Not necessarily. Many grazing animals possess digestive systems completely unlike yours. Their specialized stomachs allow them to process fibrous plants that would provide little nourishment for humans. Some even neutralize chemicals that your own body cannot safely handle. Watching teaches possibilities. Understanding requires caution. As the morning grows warmer, insects join the orchestra surrounding you. Bees drift lazily between wildflowers. Dragonflies flash brilliant blue above a nearby stream. Ants march determinedly across fallen branches carrying pieces many times their own size. Even they offer clues. Where bees gather flowering plants often flourish. Where ants harvest seeds, edible grasses may grow nearby. Tiny observations slowly combine into larger patterns until the landscape begins feeling less mysterious than it did yesterday. You are learning its rhythm, not its secrets. Those take longer. An older hunter pauses beside a broken tree trunk covered with mushrooms. Their caps gleam softly after the night's moisture. Instead of collecting them immediately, the hunter studies their shape color and growing pattern before quietly moving on. No explanation follows. None is needed. Some mushrooms nourish, others deceive. Today uncertainty wins. That quiet decision may be one of the most important lessons you receive. Ancient survival was not built solely upon discovering what could be eaten. Equally important was recognizing when not enough was known. Walking away from uncertain food often proved wiser than satisfying immediate curiosity. Restraint rarely appears dramatic. It saves lives anyway. The stream ahead murmurs gently over smooth stones polished by countless seasons. You kneel beside its edge, feeling cool water slip between your fingers. Small fish dart beneath floating leaves while water plants sway with the steady current. Life gathers around water. Food often does too. You notice birds returning repeatedly to one shaded bank where insects hover above the surface. Their predictable movements reveal more than successful hunting. They quietly map productive places across the landscape. Animals know where abundance hides. Humans notice where animals return. Bit by bit, your mental picture expands. Over weeks, months, and years, thousands of observations accumulate inside memory. Certain valleys ripen first in spring. Particular hillsides produce sweet berries after heavy rain. One grove attracts birds every autumn. Another remains strangely silent throughout the year. Silence itself becomes information. Modern archaeology increasingly suggests that prehistoric people possessed astonishing ecological knowledge of their home territories. Rather than wandering randomly, they likely followed seasonal routes refined through generations of careful observation. Every familiar landmark carried practical meaning invisible to outsiders. A particular boulder, a twisted tree, a narrow stream crossing. Each became part of an enormous mental map. Unlike written maps folded into pocket, this one lived entirely inside human memory, strengthened through repeated journeys shared with family members from childhood onward. You begin appreciating something else. Animals make mistakes too. A young bird samples unfamiliar fruit before quickly dropping it. A curious fox sniffs suspiciously at something hidden beneath leaves, then walks away untouched. Even experienced creatures investigate cautiously when encountering something unfamiliar. Nature rewards attention, regardless of species. A curious story occasionally appears in discussions of ancient survival. Some researchers have wondered whether humans may have watched ravens particularly closely. Ravens often discover carcasses, hidden food sources, and seasonal changes remarkably quickly. While direct evidence remains uncertain, their intelligence and close relationship with human settlements make the idea difficult to dismiss entirely. Perhaps the raven noticed first. Perhaps you noticed the raven. Either way, somebody learned. The afternoon sun climbs higher, warming the stones beneath your feet until they feel pleasantly rough against your skin. Resin from nearby pine trees perfumes the air with a rich, sweet scent. Somewhere behind you, children laugh briefly before their voices soften once more beneath the sounds of wind and birds. The forest no longer feels silent. It feels conversational. Every creature contributes. Every movement carries meaning. You realize that learning from animals never meant surrendering human judgment. Instead, it meant joining a larger conversation already unfolding across the landscape. Birds, insects, mammals, and even tiny rodents continuously revealed fragments of information. Humans simply became unusually gifted at gathering those fragments into something far greater. Knowledge, shared knowledge, generational knowledge. Perhaps that ability became humanity's greatest evolutionary advantage, not sharper teeth, not stronger muscles, but the remarkable talent to observe, patiently remember, faithfully compare carefully, and teach others what had been learned. Tomorrow, another lesson will arrive, perhaps from a plant perhaps from a person, or perhaps from a quiet little bird whose breakfast tells a story that words have not yet learned to tell. Section 3. Another dawn settles gently across the landscape, painting the eastern sky with pale shades of amber and soft grey. Mist lingers above the meadow like a thin blanket drifting slowly between scattered trees before dissolving beneath the growing warmth of the morning sun. Your footsteps make almost no sound as they press into damp earth, while tiny droplets of dew cling briefly to your ankles before disappearing into the soil. The world feels generous today. That can be misleading. Hunger has returned as dependable as sunrise itself, but something has changed. You no longer look at every plant with complete uncertainty. A handful have become familiar companions. Their leaves carry recognizable shapes. Their scents awaken quiet confidence. Their locations are beginning to settle inside your memory. Most others remain strangers, and strangers deserve respect. You wander beside one of the older gatherers whose pace never seems hurried despite the long day ahead. Every few steps, those experienced eyes drift toward the ground, pause on a cluster of leaves, then continue forward without stopping. Hundreds of small decisions unfold almost invisibly, each one shaped by years that you cannot yet imagine. Knowledge has become instinct, but instinct was once learned. You arrive beside a shrub covered with small dark berries. Their skin shines softly beneath the morning light. They appear healthy, plump and inviting. A gentle breeze carries their faint sweetness through the cool air. Your empty stomach notices immediately. Your teacher does not reach for them. Instead, an open hand quietly signals patience. You wait. This simple pause may be one of humanity's oldest survival techniques. Long before laboratories could identify toxins or nutrition labels could list ingredients, ancient people often relied upon gradual familiarity rather than sudden confidence. Unknown foods were approached slowly, cautiously, and with careful attention to what followed. Curiosity remained alive. Recklessness did not. Modern researchers believe that early humans likely developed practical methods for evaluating unfamiliar foods, although the exact details remain impossible to reconstruct with certainty. Archaeological evidence cannot preserve every careful bite or every cautious conversation beside an ancient fire. Yet human behavior itself offers valuable clues. Large risks rarely build lasting traditions. Small measured steps often do. Imagine discovering a plant no one in your group has ever eaten before. Eating an entire handful would invite unnecessary danger. Ignoring it forever might mean overlooking an excellent food source capable of feeding generations. Neither choice seems wise. A middle path begins to emerge. Perhaps someone first touched the leaf against the skin, watching patiently for irritation. Another day its scent might be examined more closely. A tiny piece could eventually rest against the lips before the smallest imaginable bite entered the mouth. Then came the waiting. Waiting mattered. More than eating. The hours afterward became just as important as the first taste itself. Did dizziness appear? Did the stomach remain calm? Did unusual weakness settle into tired muscles? Did sleep arrive naturally that evening? Or did something feel quietly wrong? Observation continued long after swallowing. Every meal became an experiment. Not the kind performed inside a modern laboratory with polished equipment and careful measurements, but one shaped by patience, memory, and community. Every successful experience added another small stone to the growing foundation of shared knowledge. Failure also taught lessons, sometimes unforgettable ones. The breeze shifts, carrying the scent of wild herbs growing beneath nearby shrubs. Their fragrance is sharp, fresh, and almost peppery. You rub one leaf gently between your fingers before lifting it toward your nose. The oils cling to your skin long after you release it. Smell becomes another teacher. Taste is never alone. Humans possess remarkably sensitive senses, although perhaps not as extraordinary as many other animals. Even so, smell, texture, appearance, and taste together provide layers of information before a food ever reaches the stomach. A sour odor may invite caution. An unpleasant texture may encourage another look. None of these signals guarantee danger, but they encourage attention. Scientists now understand that many poisonous plants evolved chemical defenses specifically to discourage hungry animals. These compounds often produce bitterness, burning sensations, or irritating textures. Interestingly, humans appear naturally sensitive to many bitter substances, leading some evolutionary biologists to suggest that our ancestors gradually developed strong aversions because avoiding certain bitter compounds improved survival. The story is more complicated, however. Not all bitterness signals poison. Many highly nutritious foods, including several leafy vegetables enjoyed today, contain naturally bitter chemicals. Likewise, some dangerous plants hide behind surprisingly mild flavors. Nature dislikes simple rules. You're beginning to understand why experience mattered so deeply. Nearby, another member of the group carefully slices open an unfamiliar fruit using a sharpened stone blade. Instead of passing pieces around immediately, everyone examines the inside. The flesh looks pale and firm. Tiny seeds rest in neat rows. Nobody rushes. Even promising discoveries deserve patience. Perhaps this fruit has appeared only because unusual weather changed the season. Perhaps migrating animals carried its seeds into the valley years ago. Or perhaps it has always grown here overlooked until now. Every possibility deserves consideration. Historians continue debating how often prehistoric communities encounter completely unfamiliar foods. Some researchers argue that migration into new environments regularly forced experimentation. Others believe careful observation of local ecosystems reduced much of the uncertainty before tasting ever occurred. Both ideas likely contain truth. Human history rarely follows a single path. The sounds around you seem richer than they did several mornings ago. You hear insects humming between wildflowers. Wind brushes softly through tall grass. Woodpeckers tap patiently against distant trunks. Somewhere beyond the trees, children laugh before their voices fade into ordinary conversation. The landscape no longer feels silent. It feels familiar. Familiarity changes behavior, not by removing danger, by making danger easier to recognize. You kneel beside a patch of broad green leaves growing close together. Their edges curl slightly upward, collecting tiny pools of rainwater left from the previous evening. An elder points toward them before tracing a finger along the stem. You notice the difference. A nearly identical plant grows only a few steps away. Almost identical. Almost. Its stem carries faint reddish markings absent from the first plant. The leaves feel slightly rougher beneath your fingertips. The smell is weaker, almost dusty. Tiny details separate confidence from uncertainty. These differences become easier to remember because they arrive through direct experience rather than simple explanation. Your own hands explore the leaves. Your own eyes compare their shapes. Your own nose notices subtle changes in scent. Learning becomes physical. Memory settles deeper. Anthropologists studying traditional foraging societies often note that knowledge develops through repeated participation rather than long verbal instruction. Children and younger adults accompany experienced gatherers year after year, gradually absorbing astonishing amounts of ecological information almost without realizing it. The forest becomes a library. Every season adds new pets. One curious idea occasionally appears among researchers studying human food traditions. Some have wondered whether ancient people accidentally discovered edible plants through repeated contact while performing completely unrelated tasks such as weaving baskets, collecting firewood, or making shelter. A plant handled daily might eventually invite closer examination simply because familiarity replaced suspicion. It seems entirely possible. Ordinary moments often shape extraordinary discoveries. The afternoon sun warms smooth stones beside a narrow stream where dragonflies skim just above the water. You pause there, briefly dipping your hands into the cool current. The sensation washes away dust gathered during the morning walk while sending gentle ripples across the surface. The water reflects the sky. The sky reflects patience. Every lesson you have learned since arriving in this ancient world shares one quiet message. Safe eating was never built upon fearless exploration. It rested upon careful observation, measured curiosity, thoughtful restraint, and an extraordinary willingness to slow down. That willingness changed everything. Over countless generations, thousands of cautious decisions accumulated into traditions so dependable that children inherited them almost effortlessly. A berry once feared became a trusted meal. A root once ignored became a seasonal favorite. A dangerous plant earned permanent respect. Knowledge expanded, one careful bite at a time. As evening approaches once more, the familiar fire crackles gently beneath a sky turning gold and violet. Around it, people prepare food gathered through another successful day of patient choices. The meal may appear simple, but hidden within every mouthful rests the quiet triumph of countless forgotten experiments stretching far beyond living memory. Tomorrow another question waits, and the landscape still holds many answers. Section 4. By the time another morning arrives, the landscape feels almost like an old acquaintance. The same breeze slips through the trees. The same birds greet the sunrise with lively calls. The same stream murmurs over smooth stones polished by centuries of flowing water. Yet something has quietly changed inside you. You no longer see only beauty. You notice warnings. The forest has begun revealing that every plant carries a story, although few tell it plainly. Some advertise their defenses boldly. Others whisper them so softly that only years of experience can hear. A leaf may shimmer with inviting green while hiding powerful toxins beneath its smooth surface. A twisted vine may appear lifeless, but produce nourishing fruit only weeks later. Nothing can be judged quickly. Nature prefers subtlety. You walk beside an experienced gatherer who pauses beneath a shrub covered in glossy leaves. Before touching anything, the elder simply stands still. The silence lasts several moments. Wind brushes through the branches. Sunlight flickers across the ground as clouds drift lazily overhead. Then comes the inspection. Not hurried, never careless. The leaves are turned gently between weathered fingers. Tiny veins catch the light. The edges are examined one by one. A broken stem releases a thin bead of milky sap that glistens against dark bark. The elder quietly steps back. That is enough. Without speaking, everyone understands that this plant will remain untouched today. To modern eyes, such caution might appear excessive. Yet long before chemistry explained poisonous compounds, ancient people gradually learned that certain physical signs often deserved respect. Plants leaking white sap, carrying unusually bitter flavors, producing sharp odors, or growing irritating hairs sometimes proved less friendly than their beautiful appearance suggested. Sometimes, not always, that small difference mattered enormously. Human beings naturally search for simple rules because simple rules are easy to remember. Red means danger, sweet means safe, bitter means poison. The natural world politely refuses. Bright berries may nourish one family for generations, while dull brown seeds conceal deadly chemicals. Bitter leaves sometimes become valuable medicines. Sweet fruits occasionally disguise dangerous toxins hidden within their seeds. Nature rarely signs its work. Instead, it leaves clues. You kneel beside a patch of wild herbs growing close to the forest floor. Their scent rises immediately when your fingers brush the leaves. It is fresh, sharp, almost spicy, lingering pleasantly in the cool morning air. Nearby grows another plant. Its leaves look remarkably similar, but when crushed, almost no fragrance appears. You notice the difference. Yesterday you probably would not have. Smell has become another language. Modern science has shown that countless plants release aromatic oils as part of their natural defenses or reproductive strategies. These fragrances attract pollinators, discourage insects, or protect delicate tissues from disease. Ancient people understood none of the chemistry, yet they certainly noticed that smell often accompanied familiarity. A familiar scent invited recognition. An unfamiliar one encouraged bees. Neither guaranteed safety. The forest rewards those who remember exceptions. You continue walking until sunlight pours into an open meadow where countless flowers sway gently above tall grass. Bees drift lazily between blossoms while butterflies dance almost aimlessly through the warm air. The meadow appears peaceful enough to erase every concern. Appearances can be persuasive. They can also be wrong. One cluster of flowers catches your eye. Their brilliant yellow petals shine almost like tiny pieces of the sun itself. You instinctively reach forward before another gentle hand lightly touches your wrist. Not these. The warning arrives without words. Many flowering plants protect themselves with surprisingly potent chemicals. Some irritate the skin immediately. Others become dangerous only after entering the body. Ancient gatherers could not identify molecules or toxins, but they slowly connected visible characteristics with remembered experiences. A certain flower, a familiar leaf, a distinctive stem. Memory transformed details into survival. Historians generally agree that prehistoric communities accumulated extraordinary botanical knowledge through generations of repeated observation rather than sudden discovery. Every season added another layer. Every successful harvest strengthened confidence. Every unpleasant surprise sharpened future attention. Knowledge grew slowly, like the forest itself. A curious breeze carries the rich scent of pine resin drifting from nearby trees. Sticky droplets have collected where bark has cracked beneath the summer warmth. You touch one carefully. It clings immediately. Your fingertips become glossy. The smell is warm, sweet, and comforting. Resin itself would eventually serve many purposes, from waterproofing tools to helping secure stone blades onto wooden shafts. Yet not every sticky substance deserved the same trust. Across the ancient world, countless plants produced saps capable of irritating skin or causing illness if handled carelessly. Texture became another clue. So did color. You notice how experienced gatherers rarely depend upon only one characteristic before making a decision. They combine shape, smell, growing location, season, texture, and memory into a single quiet judgment. One clue may deceive, several together become stronger. It is remarkably similar to solving a puzzle. The forest never hands you complete answers. Instead, it offers scattered pieces that only patient observation can assemble. As midday approaches, heat settles gently across the landscape. Cicadas begin their steady chorus from high branches, filling the air with a rhythmic hum that almost seems to slow time itself. Warm earth releases a pleasant mineral scent beneath your feet, while distant clouds drift lazily across an endless blue sky. The day feels peaceful. Peace encourages confidence. Too much confidence becomes dangerous. You pause beside a vine climbing through low shrubs. Hanging from its branches are clusters of inviting fruit, their smooth skins reflecting bright patches of sunlight. They appear perfectly ripe. One child smiles eagerly. An elder quietly shakes a head. The fruit remains untouched. Researchers studying traditional foraging cultures often observe that experienced gatherers frequently recognize dangerous species almost instantly, not because they consciously analyze every feature, but because years of repeated exposure create powerful visual patterns inside memory. Psychologists sometimes describe this as expert recognition rather than deliberate reasoning. The decision feels immediate. The learning took decades. You begin understanding why children spend so many years accompanying older family members into forests, grasslands, rivers, and mountains. They are not merely collecting food. They are collecting patterns, thousands upon thousands of them. A leaf with smooth edges, a stem covered in tiny hairs, a flower opening only after heavy rain, a berry growing alone instead of clustered together. Every detail quietly settles into memory until recognition becomes almost effortless. Scholars still disagree about exactly how much prehistoric botanical knowledge varied between neighbouring groups. Some suggest communities shared extensive information through seasonal gatherings and migration. Others believe isolated populations developed highly specialized expertise suited only to their local environments. The truth may include both. Human societies have always balanced sharing with adaptation. One particularly fascinating observation concerns color itself. Many people assume bright colors universally warn of poison, yet numerous edible fruits rely upon brilliant reds, blues, oranges, and purples to attract birds and mammals that disperse their seeds. Meanwhile, several dangerous plants wear modest shades of green or brown that attract almost no attention. The obvious answer is rarely complete. Nature enjoys surprises. Afternoon slowly softens toward evening. Long shadows stretch across the meadow while the breeze cools once again. You return toward camp carrying only foods recognized with quiet confidence. Several unfamiliar plants remain exactly where they were found. You leave them behind, not because they are certainly dangerous, because certainty has not yet arrived. That decision may represent one of humanity's greatest forgotten achievements. Survival was shaped not only by discoveries but also by countless temptations wisely resisted. Every untouched berry, every ignored mushroom, every uncertain root reflected remarkable discipline practiced over generations. Sometimes the safest meal is the one you chose not to eat. As darkness gathers beyond the trees, the familiar fire welcomes everyone home once again. Smoke curls upward into the evening sky, carrying scents of roasting roots, fresh herbs, and warm wood. The forest settles into its nighttime chorus while stars quietly appear above the canopy. Tomorrow you will continue learning, because the ancient world still has many secrets, and it rarely reveals them all at once. Section 5. Morning arrives with the familiar chorus of birds, but something in the air feels different today. The breeze carries a scent you have come to recognize long before you see its source. It is warm, woody, and faintly sweet, drifting lazily between the trees. Smoke, not the smoke of danger, the smoke of possibility. As you approach the campsite, thin ribbons rise from a circle of glowing embers left alive through the night. A few experienced hands kneel beside the ashes, carefully feeding dry branches into the heart of the fire. Tiny sparks leap upward before disappearing into the cool morning air. The flames awaken slowly, stretching higher with every breath of wind. Everyone watches. Fire deserves respect. Long before cities rose from stone or bronze glittered beneath the sun, this gentle companion transformed nearly every part of human life. It frightened predators, warmed cold nights, hardened wooden tools, illuminated darkness, and gathered families around a shared circle of light. Yet one of its greatest gifts quietly changed the human relationship with food forever. It taught dangerous meals to become safe ones. The change did not happen overnight, nor did anyone understand why it worked. You settle near the fire while yesterday's gathered roots are placed upon smooth stones surrounding the flames. Their rough skins slowly darken as warmth spreads inward. Moisture hisses softly where droplets strike hot rock. A rich, earthy aroma begins rising into the morning air, mingling with the scent of burning oak. Already the food smells different. Sweeter, softer, more inviting. Nearby lies another pile of roots that look remarkably similar. Yesterday they were far too bitter to consider eating. Today, after careful preparation, they may become one of the group's most valuable foods. Fire performs quiet miracles, even without understanding chemistry. Modern science now explains what your ancestors could only observe. Heat breaks apart certain harmful compounds, softens tough plant fibers, destroys many parasites, and makes starches easier to digest. Cooking cannot remove every poison, but for countless plants and animals, it transforms difficult meals into nourishing ones. Ancient people discovered this slowly, one meal at a time. Imagine the first accidental discovery. Perhaps a storm swept through the valley, leaving scorched ground behind. A patch of wild tubers baked beneath hot ash while frightened animals fled the flames. Days later, someone noticed their softened texture and sweeter taste. Or perhaps a forgotten root rolled too close to an evening fire. Curiosity did the rest. Historians cannot know exactly how cooking first became linked with safer food preparation. The evidence disappeared hundreds of thousands of years ago, carried away by weather time and countless forgotten campfires. Yet archaeologists widely agree that controlled use of fire gradually reshaped human diets in extraordinary ways. The exact timeline remains debated. The importance does not. You pick up one roasted root after it has cooled slightly. Its skin peels away almost effortlessly beneath your fingers. Steam escapes into the crisp morning air, carrying a comforting aroma, unlike the sharp bitterness it possessed before. The first bite surprises you. The flesh is soft, almost creamy. Its natural sweetness has emerged from somewhere hidden deep inside. Yesterday, this same root resisted your teeth. Today, it almost melts. The transformation feels magical. It is simply heat. As the morning continues, another discovery unfolds beside the flames. Tough strips of meat from a recent hunt are suspended above glowing coals using sharpened branches. Fat begins dripping onto the embers with gentle hissing sounds. Smoke curls upward, carrying an aroma so rich that everyone nearby instinctively breathes a little deeper. The smell promises nourishment. It also promises safety. Raw meat presents challenges invisible to ancient eyes. Tiny parasites and harmful microorganisms cannot be seen, yet they have always existed. Your ancestors understood none of this microscopic world, but they certainly recognized a practical truth. Cooked meat often caused fewer problems. Repeated experience became reliable knowledge. Thousands of years before anyone imagined bacteria families quietly noticed patterns. Meals thoroughly exposed to fire tended to leave people healthier than meals eaten raw. Nobody needed a microscope to appreciate that result. Observation remained enough. The fire crackles steadily while children gather fallen branches from the forest floor. Even this task carries lessons. Dry wood burns differently than green wood. Hardwoods produce lasting coals. Softer woods ignite quickly but disappear almost as fast. Every choice matters. Cooking begins long before food reaches the flames. You watch an elder wrap broad leaves around several bulbs before placing them beneath warm ashes. Flat stones are arranged carefully above the bundle, trapping gentle heat inside. Hours will pass before anyone disturbs them. Patience returns. It always does. Cooking in the ancient world rarely meant rushing. Slow roasting, baking beneath ashes or simmering beside gentle fires often demanded remarkable discipline. Hunger encouraged haste, but experience rewarded restraint. Good meals took time. Safer meals often took longer. Anthropologists studying traditional societies have documented astonishing cooking techniques developed without metal pots or modern tools. Heated stones transferred warmth into baskets lined with natural fibers. Underground ovens slowly roasted roots and meat beneath layers of earth. Clay-coated foods baked directly beside open flames. Human creativity flourished, especially when survival depended upon it. A fascinating example comes from ancient Australia, where Aboriginal communities developed complex earth ovens capable of slowly cooking poisonous or fibrous plants for many hours until they became edible. Similar techniques appeared independently across distant continents, suggesting that entirely separate cultures discovered remarkably similar solutions to the same problem. Different people. Shared ingenuity. The breeze shifts again, carrying the comforting fragrance of roasting herbs placed beside the meat. Their oils release into the warm air, filling the campsite with aromas that almost seem capable of easing tired muscles on their own. Smell changes expectations. It changes appetite too. Scientists today know that cooking releases hundreds of aromatic compounds not present in raw foods. These smells stimulate hunger while providing subtle clues about readiness. Ancient people did not analyze volatile molecules, yet they trusted their noses every single day. The scent became a signal. The signal became tradition. As midday sunlight filters through the trees, you notice something unexpected. Several foods gathered yesterday remain untouched despite the burning fire nearby. One mushroom rests where it was placed. A handful of unfamiliar berries remain inside a woven basket. Fire is powerful. Not all powerful. This lesson matters deep. Some natural toxins survive even prolonged cooking. Others become only slightly weaker. Ancient communities gradually learned that certain foods remain dangerous regardless of preparation. The fire solved many problems. It never solved all of them. Nature still demanded humility. Researchers continue discussing exactly how dramatically cooking influenced human evolution. One influential idea suggests that cooked foods provided more usable energy while reducing the effort required for chewing and digestion. Extra energy may have supported the development of larger brains over immense stretches of evolutionary time. The hypothesis remains influential. Many scholars support it. Others continue debating its full significance. The conversation continues. Regardless of the finer details, few question that cooking profoundly expanded humanity's menu. Roots once too tough became nourishing staples. Seeds previously difficult to digest offered valuable calories. Meat grew easier to chew, especially for children and older adults. Fire widened possibility. It expanded survival. The afternoon drifts peacefully toward evening. Warm light paints golden patterns across the campsite while smoke rises gently into the quiet sky. Someone turns roasting meat with practiced hands. Another uncovers the ash-baked roots, releasing clouds of fragrant steam that drift lazily through the cooling air. The meal feels different tonight. Not larger, wiser. Around the fire, conversation flows softly, while everyone shares food prepared through generations of careful discovery. Every technique represents countless forgotten evenings, much like this one. Someone long ago noticed that one root tasted better after roasting. Another discovered that slow cooking removed bitterness from certain bulbs. Another learned that patience mattered more than hotter flames. Their names vanished. Their wisdom remained. Scholars still argue about exactly when controlled fire became an everyday companion rather than an occasional opportunity borrowed from natural wildfires. The archaeological evidence leaves room for lively debate stretching across hundreds of thousands of years. Yet regardless of the precise dates, one truth shines as brightly as the flames before you. Fire did more than cook food. It reshaped humanity's relationship with the natural world. As darkness gently settles over the forest, you sit close to the glowing embers. Warmth reaches your hands while the cool night air brushes softly across your face. The scent of wood smoke settles comfortably into your clothing once again. The forest beyond remains full of mysteries, but inside this circle of light, one ancient secret has already changed everything. Tomorrow the earth itself will hide another lesson beneath your feet. Section 6. The morning begins beneath a sky softened by low grey clouds, their gentle shadows drifting across hills still damp from the night's cool air. The forest smells richer today. Rain that fell before dawn has awakened the scent of moss, wet bark, and dark soil. Every breath feels fresh enough to taste. The ground seems alive. That is because it is. Most of your attention has rested upon trees, berries, fruits, and leaves reaching toward the sky. Yet beneath every careful step lies another world entirely. Hidden under loose stones, tangled roots, and layers of earth are foods that never announce themselves with bright colours or sweet fragrances. The richest meals often remain invisible. You would walk past them without knowing. An experienced gatherer kneels beside a patch of ordinary-looking grass. At first, nothing appears remarkable. The plants resemble dozens of others scattered across the clearing. Their narrow leaves sway gently in the breeze, blending effortlessly into the landscape. Then the digging begins, not with haste. With quiet confidence. A pointed wooden stick presses into the damp earth, twisting slowly until the soil loosens. Gentle hands brush away clumps of mud instead of tearing through them. After several careful moments, a pale root slowly emerges from the darkness below. It is surprisingly large. Yesterday you never noticed it. The earth had kept its secret well. Across prehistoric landscapes, underground foods became some of humanity's most dependable companions. Roots, tubers, bulbs, corms, and rhizomes stored valuable energy beneath the surface protected from wind drought, grazing animals, ulstals, and seasonal weather. Even when winter stripped trees bare or dry seasons withered, leaves, hidden reserves often remained patiently buried underground. Nature had prepared a pantry. You simply had to know where to look. Modern archaeologists believe underground storage organs played an important role in many ancient diets, especially in regions where large game animals or seasonal fruits could not always be relied upon. These foods supplied carbohydrates that helped sustain communities through uncertain times. They were humble. They were essential. You brush damp soil from the freshly uncovered root. Its rough skin feels cool against your fingertips. Tiny grains of sand cling stubbornly to its surface, while the earthy aroma rising from it carries the unmistakable scent of fresh rain and rich clay. Nothing about it appears exciting. That is often the point. The most dependable foods rarely seek attention. Nearby, another younger member of the group eagerly begins digging beneath a similar patch of leaves. After only a few moments, another root appears. It looks almost identical. Almost! The elder immediately reaches a veer and gently stops the harvest. Something is wrong. Wrong. You lean closer. At first, you struggle to understand the difference. Both roots share the same pale colour. Both disappear beneath similar leaves. Both grow in nearly identical soil. Then your eyes begin noticing details. One stem twists slightly where the other grows straight. The leaves spread in a tighter cluster. Tiny purple markings appear near the base, almost hidden beneath damp earth. The differences are subtle. The consequences may not be. Few challenges tested ancient gatherers more than distinguishing edible underground plants from dangerous lookalikes. Above the soil, flowers might provide useful clues during one season. Weeks later, after blossoms disappeared, only leaves remained. Later still, even those faded away, leaving almost nothing visible except memory. Knowledge had to outlast the seasons. Memory became your greatest tool. The breeze stirs fallen leaves across the forest floor with a soft, rustling sound. Somewhere nearby, a woodpecker taps steadily against an old tree while insects hum quietly beneath the shelter of low shrubs. The world feels peaceful. The soil remains unpredictable. Modern science has identified countless poisonous bulbs and tubers containing compounds capable of affecting the heart nervous system or digestive tract. Ancient people knew none of the chemical names, yet they slowly learned something equally valuable. Appearance alone cannot be trusted. Context matters. Location matters. Season matters. The plant growing beside it may matter too. You continue walking until the forest gradually opens into a meadow scattered with patches of freshly disturbed earth. Several small animals have clearly been digging here long before sunrise. Fresh claw marks cover the ground, while loose soil forms tiny mounds beside narrow holes. The animals found something that immediately captures your attention. Watching animals search for underground food offered another possible source of inspiration for prehistoric humans. Wild pigs root enthusiastically through soil in search of bulbs and tubers. Bears sometimes uncover nutritious roots during spring. Rodents carefully store underground food for later seasons. Every creature leaves clues. Not every clue should be copied. Just as with berries and leaves, animal behavior served as a guide rather than a guarantee. Different digestive systems tolerate different foods. A pig's successful meal did not automatically become yours. Observation remained valuable. Judgment remained essential. One curious sight unfolds nearby as a family of wild boar noses through soft mud after last night's rain. Their powerful snouts overturn stones, scatter leaves, and expose tangled roots hidden beneath the surface. The forest floor changes quickly. Within minutes, places that looked ordinary now reveal an entirely different landscape. Perhaps ancient people occasionally discovered edible plants by following similar disturbances left behind by animals. Historians still debate how often such opportunities influence prehistoric gathering, but the possibility seems wonderfully plausible. Sometimes another creature began the search. Humans finished it. The elder kneels again, this time uncovering a cluster of rounded bulbs wrapped in papery outer layers. They resemble onions, though milder in appearance. Before anyone collects them, one bulb is sliced open using a carefully sharpened stone blade. Its scent rises immediately. Sharp, sweet, familiar. The smell alone brings quiet smiles. Recognition matters. Not every lesson requires words. Scientists now understand that many edible bulbs store energy as sugars or starches, allowing plants to survive unfavorable seasons beneath the ground. Humans eventually learned to harvest these hidden reserves with remarkable efficiency, though often only during very specific times of year. Dig too early, the bulb remains small. Dig too late, it may already have spent its stored energy producing new growth. Timing changes everything. The afternoon grows warmer, and the damp earth begins releasing a comforting mineral fragrance as sunlight breaks through scattered clouds. Mud dries slowly upon your hands, forming thin cracks across your skin before flaking away. Digging is demanding work, more demanding than gathering berries, yet the rewards often justify every effort. Unlike delicate fruits that spoil quickly, many underground foods remain safely stored within the earth, until needed. The soil itself protects them from weather-hungry birds and wandering animals. Nature provides storage. Without baskets, without buildings, without walls, anthropologists studying traditional foraging societies have documented extraordinary knowledge surrounding underground plants. Experienced gatherers often identify productive patches from barely visible signs, slight depressions in the soil, subtle leafless arrangements, or tiny cracks left by growing bulbs beneath the surface. To outsiders, nothing appears unusual. To experts, the landscape speaks clearly. Generations sharpen perception. Researchers continue discussing exactly how prehistoric communities first recognized edible underground plants. Some argue accidental discovery played an important role. Others suggest systematic observation gradually revealed dependable patterns over many lifetimes. Perhaps both occurred. Human history often favors many small beginnings instead of one dramatic breakthrough. Late in the afternoon, another lesson quietly unfolds. A freshly uncovered root is placed beside yesterday's roasted examples. This one will not be eaten. Not today. The elder explains without words by simply pointing toward its milky sap now slowly oozing from the broken end. Everyone nods. Recognition spreads silently through the group. One dangerous root remembered protects countless future meals. The evening fire welcomes everyone once again. The day's harvest rests nearby, still dusted with traces of the earth from which it came. As several roots begin roasting beneath warm ashes, steam escapes through tiny cracks in their skins, carrying rich aromas that mingle with wood smoke drifting into the cooling air. You brush the remaining dirt from beneath your fingernails. The soil lingers. So does today's lesson. The ancient world never revealed all of its nourishment above the ground where anyone could see it. Some of its greatest gifts preferred darkness, waiting patiently beneath layers of earth for careful eyes, skilled hands, and patient minds. Tomorrow another challenge will arrive, because even the safest foods refuse to remain the same forever. The changing seasons have their own ideas. Section 7. 7. Morning feels different before you even open your eyes. The air is cooler. A gentle breeze slips through the trees carrying the dry fragrance of fallen leaves instead of the sweet perfume of fresh blossoms. Somewhere overhead, flocks of birds call to one another with unusual urgency, their voices drifting farther than they did only weeks ago. Even the sunlight appears softer, stretching long golden beams across the forest floor instead of the bright white light of midsummer. The world has changed, almost without asking your permission. Yesterday, you learned that finding food meant recognizing plants hidden beneath the earth. Today, the land quietly teaches an even greater lesson. Nothing edible stays the same forever. Not berries, not roots, not admirnables, not even familiar forests. You rise from the campsite while cool dew dampens your feet. The ground feels firmer beneath each step than it did after the recent rains. Small patches of grass have already begun turning pale, while the edges of broad leaves curl gently toward the earth. The season is shifting. The menu shifts with it. Modern people often imagine prehistoric life as a long, unchanging routine, yet your world refuses to remain still. Every few weeks, the landscape quietly rewrites its own rules. A valley overflowing with fruit in early summer may become nearly empty by autumn. Tender shoots disappear. Flowers become seeds. Green berries darken, sweeten, wrinkle, and finally vanish altogether. Nature never signs a permanent agreement. It prefers temporary invitations. You follow an older gatherer toward a familiar berry patch visited several mornings ago. The bushes still stand exactly where you remember them. Their branches still sway gently beneath the breeze, but something feels wrong. Wrong. The berries are gone. Only a handful remain shriveled beneath drying leaves. Birds have already celebrated the harvest. You arrive too late. Disappointment passes quietly through the group, yet no one appears surprised. Instead, everyone calmly changes direction without hesitation, as though expecting this outcome all along. In truth, they were. Experience has taught them that every food follows its own calendar. Berries appear for only a brief window before birds, insects, weather, and time claim the rest. Missing that window means looking elsewhere. The forest always offers alternatives, if you know where to search. Historians and archaeologists widely agree that prehistoric people lived according to seasonal rhythms far more closely than modern societies. Instead of eating identical meals throughout the year, they constantly adapted to changing landscapes. Entire travel routes, hunting strategies, and gathering routines shifted alongside weather and plant cycles. The calendar lived outdoors, not inside a book. You continue walking until the trees gradually open into a sunny meadow. Only a month ago, delicate flowers covered the field with brilliant colours. Today, most blossoms have disappeared. In their place stand tall grasses heavy with ripened seeds that shimmer softly beneath the morning light. The meadow has not become empty. It has become different. That distinction matters. Ancient gatherers understood that apparent loss often concealed new opportunities. A flower fading did not signal failure. It marked the beginning of another stage in the plant's life. You kneel beside several seed heads brushing gently against your hands. Tiny grains fall easily into your palm with the slightest touch. Last month there was nothing here worth collecting. Now the ground is generous. Scientists studying ancient plant remains have discovered evidence that prehistoric communities gathered wild grain seeds and grasses long before agriculture emerged. Harvesting these tiny foods required remarkable patience, but together they supplied valuable nutrition during important seasons. No single seed changes history. Thousands together certainly can. A faint breeze lifts loose husks into the air where they spin briefly before settling back onto the earth. The dry scent of sun-warmed grass surrounds you, mingling with distant pine, and the faint aroma of smoke still drifting from camp. Everything smells here, near sea fells. Older, richer somehow. The season leaves its signature everywhere. Nearby children carefully collect handfuls of seeds into woven baskets while older adults gently shake mature stalks over animal skins spread across the ground. Every movement appears practiced, efficient, and almost peaceful. Nobody rushes. The harvest rewards steady hands. As midday approaches, clouds slowly gather across the horizon, softening the bright sunlight into gentle silver. Shadows drift lazily across hillsides where familiar shrubs now carry fruits, unlike those you gathered earlier in the year. Some are sweeter, others less so. Ripeness itself becomes another lesson. You reach toward a cluster of berries still showing patches of green beneath their dark skins. Once again, a quiet hand pauses your movement. Not yet. Tomorrow may be better. Perhaps next week. Time itself determines safety. Modern research confirms that many fruits undergo remarkable chemical changes while ripening. Sugars increase, acids soften. Defensive compounds often decline, making mature fruits both tastier and easier to digest. Ancient people understood none of the underlying biology, yet repeated observation revealed dependable patterns. Waiting improved meals. Patience improved survival. You begin noticing something else. The same plant behaves differently depending upon weather. A dry summer produces smaller fruit than a rainy one. Cold nights slow ripening. Strong winds scatter seeds earlier than expected. Even familiar gathering places surprise those who assume every year will unfold exactly like the last. Nature dislikes repetition. It enjoys variation. This constant change demanded extraordinary flexibility from prehistoric communities. Memorizing one successful season was never enough. Every new year required fresh observation alongside remembered experience. Memory provided guidance. Attention supplied correction. Researchers still debate exactly how prehistoric groups predicted seasonal food availability across large territories. Some scholars suggest flowering patterns, migrating birds, or even insect behavior acted as reliable signals. Others believe detailed ecological memory alone explained much of their success. Perhaps several systems work together. The natural world rarely depends upon only one clue. The afternoon carries you toward a broad river, where water flows lower than it did during spring. Smooth stones now rise above the surface, creating new crossing points impossible only months earlier. Fish gather in deeper pools while reeds along the banks begin releasing fluffy seeds into the breeze. The river has changed too. Everything has. You pause beside several trees whose branches hang heavy with nuts protected inside hard shells. They are not ready today. Soon, but not yet. Experienced gatherers smile quietly as they pass beneath them. They are already thinking weeks ahead, planning future journeys before today's walk has even ended. Survival favors foresight, not merely reaction. Anthropologists studying traditional hunter-gatherer societies often describe seasonal knowledge as an enormous mental calendar. Rather than remembering dates, people remembered relationships. When one flower bloomed, another fruit would soon ripen. When certain birds returned, fish gathered in predictable places. When particular insects emerged underground, bulbs reached their best flavor. The landscape became a clock. Every living thing marked time. One fascinating idea proposed by several researchers suggests that storytelling itself may have helped preserve these seasonal relationships. Instead of memorizing isolated facts, younger generations remembered songs, myths, and narratives connecting plants, animals, weather, and stars into meaningful patterns. Historians continue discussing exactly how widespread such practices may have been during deep prehistory. The evidence remains incomplete. The possibility remains beautiful. Late in the afternoon, a gentle rain begins falling across the valley. Tiny droplets patter softly against broad leaves while cool air carries the clean scent of wet earth through the forest. You pause beneath a large tree watching water collect on branches before falling rhythmically onto the ground below. Rain changes tomorrow's plans. It always has. Some mushrooms will appear after the storm. Certain trails will become muddy. Fresh shoots may emerge within days. Others will disappear beneath rising water. The landscape never stops rewriting itself. As evening approaches, everyone returns to camp carrying foods gathered from a season that exists only briefly before yielding to the next. The baskets contain seeds instead of flowers, nuts instead of blossoms, late berries instead of early ones. Nothing feels permanent. That is precisely why knowledge matters. Around the familiar fire smoke curls upward into the cool evening sky while the scent of roasting seeds and freshly gathered roots fills the air. The conversation flows softly beneath the stars, and somewhere beyond the glow of the flames, the forest quietly continues preparing for another season still waiting beyond the horizon. You begin to understand that ancient survival was never about memorizing a single list of edible foods. It was about remembering when each one welcomed you. Tomorrow another lesson awaits, because even the changing seasons cannot prepare you for the wisdom carried by those who remember them all. Section 8. The morning begins more quietly than usual. Even the birds seem to sing a little softer, their calls blending gently with the steady rustle of leaves high above your head. A cool mist drifts lazily through the forest, wrapping tree trunks in pale ribbons before slowly dissolving beneath the first rays of sunlight. The familiar scent of smoke lingers over the campsite mixed with damp earth and freshly split wood. Today no one seems in a hurry. There is no urgent hunt, no long march. Instead, everyone gathers near the fire, while breakfast is prepared from foods collected over many careful seasons. Children sit close beside older family members. Younger adults listen more than they speak. Conversations unfold slowly, interrupted only by the crackling of burning branches and the occasional cheerful laugh. Something important is happening, not a ceremony. A lesson. Long before books rested upon shelves or words were carved into stone, humanity possessed another library entirely. It had no walls. It required no ink. Every page lived inside someone's memory. The elders carried it. Without them, much of the world became dangerous again. You glance toward one woman whose silver hair catches the early sunlight. Her hands move more slowly than those of the younger gatherers, yet nobody questions where she walks or what she chooses. When she points toward a distant hillside, others quietly nod without hesitation. Experience speaks softly. Everyone still hears it. Modern societies often celebrate speed, novelty, and youthful energy. In the ancient world, survival frequently rewarded something different. People who had witnessed 40 or 50 cycles of changing seasons possessed knowledge that could not be gathered quickly. They remembered. That was priceless. Perhaps they recalled which valley flooded after unusually heavy spring rains. Perhaps they remembered the bitter root that became edible only after the third frost. Perhaps they knew which berries remained safe during dry summers, but spoiled rapidly after weeks of rain. Tiny details accumulated, year after year, decade after decade. Eventually, memory itself became one of the community's most valuable resources. Anthropologists studying traditional hunter-gatherer societies have repeatedly observed that older adults often contribute enormous amounts of ecological knowledge despite gathering or hunting less actively than younger members. Their greatest gift is not physical strength. It is accumulated understanding. Thousands of forgotten mornings, thousands of successful meals, thousands of mistakes carefully remembered. You accompany the silver-haired elder into the forest. Her pace is unhurried, almost gentle, yet somehow every step appears intentional. She pauses frequently, not because she is tired, but because she is looking. Really looking. You begin noticing things only after she does. A tiny cluster of edible greens hiding beneath fallen branches. Fresh animal tracks crossing a narrow stream. Young shoots emerging where last year's fire cleared the undergrowth. The forest seems larger and far more detailed. Knowledge changes what the eyes can see. A younger gatherer might hurry past these quiet signs while searching for obvious food. The elder notices nearly everything. Years have trained her attention until the landscape reveals itself almost willingly. The lesson requires no speech. Observation becomes imitation. You imitate her pace. You imitate him. Or a patient. Gradually you imitate her way of seeing. The morning breeze carries the delicate fragrance of crushed mint growing beside a damp path. The elder kneels, gently rubbing several leaves between her fingertips before smiling faintly. You recognize the scent immediately. Only a few weeks ago it meant nothing. Now it brings confidence. That is how memory grows. not through one dramatic revelation but through hundreds of small recognitions quietly stitched together over time. Scientists often describe human memory as being strengthened through repeated experience linked with emotion or practical importance. Ancient survival provided both. A plant that fed your family during a difficult winter became impossible to forget. So did one that caused painful illness. Memory favoured consequences. The forest rewarded memory. By midday, sunlight filters through the canopy in scattered patches of warm gold. Dust motes drift lazily through the beams, while insects hum softly among flowering shrubs. The elder pauses beside an ordinary-looking tree whose bark appears rough and deeply cracked. You have walked past it before, many times. Today she gently peels away a small piece of bark, revealing a pale inner layer beneath the darker outer surface. She offers it to you. Its taste surprises you. Slightly sweet, faintly earthy. Not enough for a meal. Enough to remember. Many ancient cultures discovered useful foods, medicines, fibers and tools hidden inside plants that outsiders barely noticed. Inner bark from certain trees could be dried, ground, or eaten during difficult seasons. Young shoots from familiar species often tasted entirely different from mature branches. The obvious was only the beginning. The deeper lessons took years. Historians continue debating exactly how prehistoric communities organized and transmitted ecological knowledge. Some researchers believe instruction occurred constantly through ordinary daily life, with children learning naturally by participation. Others suggest that important lessons may occasionally have been emphasized through ritual storytelling or seasonal gatherings. Perhaps both happened. Learning rarely depends upon only one method. You arrive beside a clearing where several children eagerly examine unfamiliar berries growing among low shrubs. Their excitement is understandable. The fruit looks wonderfully inviting beneath the afternoon sun. Nobody scolds them. Instead, the elder quietly kneels. She points first toward the berry, then toward another plant growing nearby, then toward the shape of the leaves, finally toward the smoothness of the stem. Every clue matters. The children repeat each observation aloud, smiling as they begin noticing differences that had escaped them moments earlier. No fear fills the lesson, only careful attention. That quiet approach may explain why ecological knowledge survived for countless generations. Instead of teaching only rules, elders taught ways of observing. Rules sometimes fail when landscapes change. Observation continues working. Rain falls unexpectedly. Plants migrate. Animals disappear. New foods arrive. Careful thinking adapts. Researchers studying indigenous knowledge systems frequently emphasize that traditional ecological understanding is dynamic rather than frozen. Communities continuously observe environmental changes instead of relying solely upon inherited information. The elders remember. They also keep learning. That balance may be one of humanity's greatest strengths. A fascinating idea occasionally discussed among anthropologists is known as the grandmother hypothesis. One influential theory suggests that older adults, particularly grandmothers, may have significantly improved the survival of younger generations by sharing food, caring for children, and passing along practical knowledge accumulated over decades. Not every scholar agrees with every detail. The evidence remains actively debated, yet few question that experienced elders played profoundly important roles within ancient communities. Knowledge itself became nourishment. The afternoon breeze cools as clouds drift slowly overhead. The forest grows quieter, and somewhere in the distance a raven calls across the valley with its familiar rough voice. The elder smiles faintly. She pauses to watch the bird. Perhaps she notices something you do not. Perhaps tomorrow's lesson has already begun. One remarkable quality of experienced gatherers becomes increasingly obvious. They are rarely surprised by ordinary events. Weather changes, fruit ripens early, birds gather in unusual places. Instead of reacting with confusion, they quietly compare today's observations with decades of remembered seasons. Patterns emerge. Confidence follows. The forest feels less unpredictable through experienced eyes. As evening settles over the landscape, everyone gathers once more around the glowing fire. Warm light flickers across familiar faces while smoke rises peacefully into a sky, already welcoming the first stars of the night. Stories begin. Not dramatic adventures, simple memories. Someone recalls a particularly cold winter when hidden bulbs saved the community. Another remembers following migrating birds to unexpected berry patches many years ago. A third laughs gently while describing an early mistake made during childhood under the patient guidance of an elder now long gone. Laughter joins memory. Memory joins survival. Each story carries practical wisdom wrapped inside gentle conversation. Children listen without realizing they are studying. Young adults absorb details they may not need until years from now. The lessons settle quietly, like falling leaves. You realize that the most valuable treasure surrounding this ancient fire is not the food resting beside the flames. It is the invisible collection of experiences shared from one voice to another, one season to the next, one generation to those still waiting to be born. No library could contain it all. No stone tablet could record every detail. Only people could. As the fire burns lower, glowing embers pulse softly beneath a blanket of grey ash. The forest beyond the light grows darker, yet it no longer feels quite so mysterious. Because someone has already walked these paths, someone has already learned these lessons, and tonight they have begun placing that knowledge gently into your hands. Tomorrow another generation will begin learning, and this quiet chain of memory will continue once again. Section 9. The sun has barely climbed above the horizon when the campsite begins to stir with quiet excitement. Small feet patter softly across the damp ground. Gentle laughter drifts between the shelters. Somewhere nearby a child proudly holds up a smooth stone discovered beside the stream, admiring it as though it were a precious treasure. In many ways it is. Every discovery begins with curiosity, and curiosity begins young. The morning air feels cool against your skin, carrying the clean scent of dew-covered grass, mixed with the faint smoke of a fire patiently returning to life. Birds chatter busily in the branches overhead, while squirrels leap effortlessly from tree to tree, scattering tiny flakes of bark onto the forest floor. Today your attention turns away from the elders. Instead you watch the children, not because they already know everything, because they are quietly learning almost every moment they are awake. One little girl follows her grandmother toward the edge of the forest, carefully matching each step despite legs much shorter than those of the older woman. A young boy trails behind two experienced gatherers carrying a woven basket almost larger than his own torso. Neither child contributes much food today. That is not the point. They are gathering something far more valuable. Experience. The lessons begin almost immediately. The grandmother pauses beside a familiar patch of edible greens. Rather than harvesting them herself, she gently gestures toward the leaves. The child studies them, carefully hesitates, then reaches down with small, cautious fingers. Not quite. The grandmother smiles warmly. She points toward another cluster only a few inches away. This time the child notices the difference. The leaves are smoother, the stem slightly thicker, the shape just a little rounder. Tiny details, enormous importance. Learning unfolds through gentle correction rather than stern warning. No one expects perfection after a single morning. Mistakes are anticipated, but they are guided before becoming dangerous. Knowledge guides safely. One careful observation at a time. Modern anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer societies often describe childhood as a remarkably long period of practical education. Young people spend years accompanying adults through forests, grasslands, rivers and mountains, gradually building astonishing ecological knowledge without formal classrooms or written textbooks. The landscape itself becomes the teacher. Adults simply introduce the lessons. You continue walking behind the small group until they arrive beside a cluster of berry bushes already familiar to you. Several ripe fruits glisten beneath the morning sunlight, their skin sparkling with tiny droplets left behind by the night's cool air. The children recognize them immediately. That recognition brings quiet satisfaction. Only weeks ago, every bush looked almost identical. Now memory has begun sorting the world into meaningful patterns. Safe, uncertain, not today. Those invisible categories quietly expand every season. A little farther along the trail, another child spots an unfamiliar mushroom pushing through damp moss beneath an old fallen tree. Its pale cap looks almost inviting, and curiosity quickly wins the race. Tiny fingers reach forward. An older brother gently stops them, not with fear. With patience. Instead of saying only, "Don't touch," he kneels beside the mushroom and quietly compares it with another growing nearby. The cap differs slightly. The stem feels thicker. The smell carries a faint earthy sweetness absent from the first. Neither mushroom will be collected. The comparison itself becomes the lesson. Scientists studying how humans learn have repeatedly found that active participation strengthens memory far more effectively than passive observation alone. Ancient people understood this instinctively, even without modern psychology. Children remembered what they touched, smelled, compared, and discussed far better than what they merely watched from a distance. Learning became physical. The hands remembered too. The forest seems wonderfully alive this morning. Sunlight filters through young leaves, painting shifting patterns across the ground as the breeze gently moves the canopy overhead. Bees hum quietly among wildflowers. A distant woodpecker taps rhythmically against an aging oak, while somewhere beyond the stream a raven calls into the bright sky. Every sound feels familiar now. The world has become less mysterious. Not because it has changed, because you have. You notice that children rarely wander completely alone. Freedom exists, but it expands gradually with experience. Younger ones remain close to adults, exploring only within comfortable boundaries. Older children roam farther, returning proudly, with handfuls of edible leaves or carefully chosen berries for quiet approval. Responsibility grows slowly. Just like knowledge, historians believe this gradual transfer of responsibility likely characterized much of prehistoric childhood. Dangerous skills, including identifying edible plants, recognizing poisonous species, tracking animals, and understanding seasonal changes, required years of guided practice before complete independence became possible. No one expected mastery overnight. Nature discouraged impatience. A fascinating scene unfolds beside a shallow stream where several children gather smooth pebbles while waiting for adults to finish collecting water plants. One curious boy absent-mindedly chews the end of a reed before immediately making a face. Too bitter. Everyone laughs gently. Even the adults smile. No harsh criticism follows. Instead, the nearest elder calmly explains through demonstration that another reed growing only a short distance away tastes entirely different. The boy tries again. This time he nods happily. One small mistake. One permanent memory. Psychologists often describe childhood mistakes as powerful learning opportunities because they combine surprise with direct experience. Ancient communities likely benefited enormously from allowing harmless errors, while carefully preventing dangerous ones. Safe curiosity remained encouraged. Unsafe curiosity received little guidance. That delicate balance may have shaped generations of remarkably skilled foragers. Researchers still debate exactly how structured prehistoric teaching may have been. Some scholars argue that children mostly learned through observation and imitation during everyday activities. Others suggest adults deliberately designed situations allowing younger members to practice important skills under close supervision. Both approaches seem entirely possible. Human learning rarely follows only one path. As midday warmth spreads across the valley, the group pauses beneath a broad oak tree whose shade offers welcome relief from the growing sun. Lunch consists of familiar roots roasted during the previous evening, dried berries collected earlier in the season, and nuts carefully cracked open using smooth stones. Even mealtime teaches. Children watch which foods older adults choose first. They notice how unfamiliar plants remain untouched. They observe conversations about where tomorrow's gathering should begin. Nothing is wasted. Not even ordinary moments. One particularly charming detail catches your attention. A little girl proudly offers her grandmother several leaves she carefully selected herself. The elder examines them thoughtfully before smiling and placing only 2 into the gathering basket. The remaining leaves are handed back. Not these. The child studies them again, then suddenly notices the mistake. A grin spread across her face. She has learned. Without embarrassment, without fear, only through gentle practice. Anthropologists have often remarked that many traditional societies emphasize encouragement over punishment during practical teaching. Confidence and careful attention grow together when mistakes become opportunities instead of sources of shame. The forest rewards thoughtful learners, not frightened ones. The afternoon breeze carries the warm scent of pine needles baking beneath the summer sun, while dragonflies skim gracefully above the nearby stream. Children now spread across the meadow in small groups, each accompanied by someone just a little older and more experienced. Learning forms a chain. Every generation teaches the next. Perhaps that quiet chain explains one of humanity's greatest achievements. The remarkable ecological knowledge accumulated over thousands of years did not survive because everyone rediscovered it independently. It survived because children inherited it. One conversation, one walk, one carefully chosen berry. At a time, a curious idea occasionally discussed by archaeologists suggests that children's footprints preserved beside adult tracks at ancient sites may reveal far more than simple family travel. Those shared journeys might represent classrooms stretching across entire landscapes where every trail doubled as a lesson in survival. The footprints remain, the conversations disappeared, yet somehow their wisdom endured. As evening approaches, everyone returns toward the comforting glow of the familiar fire. The baskets are not overflowing, but they contain enough. More importantly, they hold foods gathered by hands that have become slightly more knowledgeable than they were yesterday. That may be the greater harvest. Smoke rises peacefully into the cooling sky, while supper slowly roasts above glowing embers. Children eagerly describe what they noticed during the day. Adults listen carefully, occasionally asking gentle questions instead of immediately providing answers. The conversation continues. Learning continues. So does memory. Watching these young faces illuminated by dancing firelight, you realize that the future of every ancient community rested not only upon today's successful meal, but upon tomorrow's capable gatherers. Every lesson patiently shared beside a forest path quietly extended humanity's story for another generation. And tomorrow those growing hands will learn that finding safe food does not end with gathering plants. Sometimes the greatest challenge begins only after the hunt. Section 10. Morning breaks beneath a sky washed clean by the night's gentle rain. Tiny droplets still cling to the tips of grass, sparkling briefly whenever the rising sun slips through the scattered branches overhead. The air feels wonderfully crisp, carrying the mingled scents of damp earth, fresh pine, and fading wood smoke from the fire that protected your camp until dawn. Today feels different. The gathering baskets remain where they were left yesterday. Instead, several hunters quietly prepare for a journey beyond the familiar berry patches and root-filled meadows. Stone points are carefully secured onto wooden shafts. Leather bindings are checked one final time. Spears rest against shoulders polished smooth by years of steady use. Food waits elsewhere today. It has a heartbeat. For thousands upon thousands of years, plants formed only part of humanity's ancient menu. Across forests, grasslands, mountains, and frozen plains, animals offered rich supplies of fat, protein, bone marrow, hides, sinew, and countless other valuable resources. Yet bringing down an animal solved only half the problem. Knowing what to do afterward mattered just as much. You follow the hunting party through quiet woodland, where every footstep seems measured against the sounds of the waking forest. Birds continue their morning songs above you, but conversation fades almost completely. Dry leaves no longer crunch beneath careless feet. Everyone moves with remarkable patience. The hunt begins long before the chase. It begins with attention. Fresh hoofprints press gently into damp soil beside a narrow stream. Nearby branches show signs of recent browsing where deer stripped tender shoots only hours before sunrise. A few strands of coarse brown hair cling to rough bark where an animal brushed past while squeezing between young trees. The clues feel almost invisible, until someone teaches you how to see them. Eventually the trail leads into a broad meadow shimmering beneath golden morning light. A small herd of deer grazes peacefully in the distance, completely unaware of the careful eyes watching from the forest edge. The hunters wait. No one rushes. Patience has accompanied nearly every lesson you have learned. Once again, it proves essential. Hours later, after quiet movement, careful planning, and more than a little fortune, the hunt succeeds. The animal falls quickly and silence settles gently across the meadow. There is no celebration, only gratitude. Many traditional cultures throughout history have approached successful hunts with quiet respect rather than loud triumph. Animals represented life itself. Wasting that gift would have been difficult to imagine in a world where every meal demanded genuine effort. The work has only begun. Perhaps the hardest part. You watch as experienced hands begin examining the animal with extraordinary care. Stone blades sharpened through countless patient strokes move confidently beneath the hide. Every cut appears deliberate. Nothing happens by accident. The body becomes a map. Knowledge guides every movement. Modern people visiting a grocery store rarely consider how much anatomical understanding ancient hunters gradually acquired. Yet prehistoric communities learned remarkable details about muscles, joints, organs, tendons, and bones simply through repeated experience across generations. They became practical anatomists, without ever using the word. The rich scent of fresh meat mingles with damp grass and cool morning air. Ravens begin circling high overhead, their sharp eyes already noticing what has happened below. Somewhere farther away, the distant howl of a wolf reminds everyone that humans are not the only hunters watching this valley. Time suddenly matters. Other mouths are coming. The first portions carefully removed are not necessarily the largest. Certain organs receive immediate attention because they spoil more quickly than muscle meat. Others remain untouched until experienced hunters carefully inspect them. Not every part belongs on the fire. Some require caution. Ancient people gradually learned that healthy-looking animals generally provided safer meals than those appearing weak, unusually thin, or strangely behaved. They could not identify viruses or bacteria, but they certainly noticed patterns linking unusual animals with unpleasant outcomes. Observation once again became protection. Experience sharpened judgment. Researchers studying prehistoric hunting agree that ancient communities likely developed sophisticated methods for evaluating animals before and after death. Signs of disease injury, unusual parasites, or strange odors probably influenced decisions about what could safely be eaten. The exact methods remain uncertain. The careful thinking does not, You notice one hunter quietly setting aside several organs while another begins removing long strips of meat from the hind legs. Nothing appears random. Every choice reflects memory. One fascinating reality of prehistoric diets surprises many modern readers. Some of the most nutritious parts of hunted animals were not always the large muscles we commonly eat today. Organs such as the liver, heart and kidneys contain remarkable concentrations of vitamins and minerals. Yet they also demanded knowledge. Too much of certain organs from particular animals could prove harmful. Modern scientists know, for example, that the livers of some Arctic predators contain extraordinarily high levels of vitamin A. Consuming excessive amounts can become dangerous. Historians still debate how prehistoric northern peoples learned to avoid such risks, but traditional knowledge eventually reflected remarkable precision. Nature rewarded moderation, as it often does. Nearby another hunter kneels beside a large bone before striking it carefully with a rounded stone. The bone cracks open with a satisfying sound revealing pale marrow hidden safely inside. The children watching nearby smile. They know what comes next. Bone marrow became one of humanity's richest ancient foods, packed with energy that proved especially valuable during colder months or after demanding hunts. Archaeological sites across Africa, Europe and Asia preserve broken animal bones bearing unmistakable signs of deliberate marrow extraction, stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. The evidence survives beautifully. Stone, bone, memory written without words. The afternoon breeze drifts across the meadow, carrying warm scents of crushed herbs beneath busy feet. Insects hum lazily through wildflowers while smoke begins rising from a small cooking fire prepared beside the butchering site. Some meat will travel home, some will be cooked immediately. Freshness shapes the decision. You notice strips of meat carefully hanging from wooden frames where gentle smoke begins surrounding them. The process unfolds slowly. No flames touch the meat directly. Only smoke. Only warmth. Smoking and drying likely became two of humanity's earliest food preservation techniques. Long before pottery, refrigeration or metal containers existed, careful exposure to smoke and moving air extended the usefulness of precious meat for days, weeks, or sometimes even longer depending upon climate. One successful hunt, many future meals. Nothing valuable should be wasted. Even the hide receives careful attention. It will eventually become clothing, bedding, carrying bags or shelter coverings. Tendons may serve as strong thread. Bones become tools, needles, fish hooks or spear points. Antlers may be shaped into digging implements. The animal feeds more than hunger. It supports daily life itself. Anthropologists have repeatedly noted that many traditional hunting societies developed astonishing efficiency in using nearly every available part of harvested animals. Waste represented more than carelessness. It represented lost opportunity. A curious discussion continues among archaeologists concerning exactly how responsibilities were divided during prehistoric butchering. Some evidence suggests highly specialized roles may have existed within certain groups, while other researchers believe practical knowledge was more widely shared. The truth probably varied. Different landscapes encourage different traditions. As the sun slowly begins descending toward distant hills, everyone prepares for the journey home. Carefully wrapped bundles of meat rest inside woven carrying frames. Bones chosen for later use travel alongside them. Even small scraps are gathered with thoughtful care. The meadow gradually returns to set. Only footprints. Along with a few circling ravens. Back at camp, the familiar evening fire burns steadily beneath a sky already welcoming its first stars. Rich aromas fill the cool air as fresh meat roasts above glowing coals beside roots and herbs collected during previous days. Children watch closely. Another lesson unfolds. They observe which cuts cook first, which organs require special preparation, which bones will be saved for tomorrow. Nothing happens without purpose. Researchers still argue about certain details of prehistoric food preparation, and particularly how different human species shared hunting knowledge across immense stretches of time. Some questions may never receive complete answers, yet the broader picture grows clearer every year. Ancient hunters were far more than skilled trackers. They were knowledgeable processors, careful observers, practical anatomists, and remarkably thoughtful stewards of every hard-earned meal. The fire crackles gently as darkness settles over the valley. Warm light dances across familiar faces, while the comforting scent of roasted meat mingles once again with wood smoke and cool evening air. Tomorrow your journey will leave the forest for another kind of wilderness. The rivers are waiting, and beneath their quiet surfaces entirely new dangers drift unseen. Section 11. The first light of dawn arrives wrapped in silver mist. Unlike the quiet stillness of the forest, the river is already awake. Water slips endlessly over polished stones with a soothing murmur that never truly stops. Tiny ripples catch the morning light, scattering thousands of shimmering reflections across the surface. The air feels cooler here, carrying the clean scent of fresh water mixed with damp reeds, smooth mud, and the faint saltiness drifting inland from a distant sea. The river seems peaceful. That too can be deceptive. You have spent many days learning the language of forests and meadows. You have discovered berries that nourish roots that deceive and leaves that quietly announce their secrets. Today, however, you step into an entirely different world, one where danger often remains invisible. You kneel beside the water's edge while dragonflies glide effortlessly above the reeds. Small fish dart between waving plants beneath the clear surface, disappearing almost as quickly as they appear. A turtle slips silently from a sun-warmed log into the deeper water without leaving more than a gentle circle of ripples behind. Everything feels calm, yet every meal gathered here demands careful judgment. For prehistoric people, rivers, lakes, marshes, and coastlines offered extraordinary abundance. Fish, shellfish, turtles, frogs, waterfowl, edible reeds, water chestnuts, lotus roots, seaweed, and countless other foods gathered wherever water collected. Life attracted life. Humans followed both. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient fishing tools dating back tens of thousands of years, including bone hooks, woven traps, harpoons, nets, and carefully carved wooden spears. Long before agriculture transformed human societies, many communities depended heavily upon rivers and coastlines for daily survival. Water fed civilizations. Long before civilizations existed, an experienced fisher quietly leads you downstream toward a broad, shallow bend where the current slows almost imperceptibly. You notice nothing unusual. The elder smiles, then points toward the surface. Only then do you see them. Dozens of fish. They hover almost motionless near submerged stones, where insects drifting downstream become effortless meals. The fish understand the river. Now you begin to. Success here depends less upon chasing fish than predicting where they wish to be. Fast currents require energy. Calm pools conserve it. Fallen trees provide shelter. Gravel beds invite spawning during particular seasons. Every bend tells a story. You simply learn to read it. Nearby, two younger adults carefully lower a woven basket trap into the water between several rocks. The current flows gently through the narrow opening while making escape surprisingly difficult for curious fish swimming inside. No excitement follows. Only patience. The river rewards those willing to wait. That lesson sounds wonderfully familiar by now. As the morning brightens, another group wades into the shallows carrying sharpened wooden spears. Their movements remain remarkably slow. Every step disturbs the water as little as possible. Even breathing seems quieter. The fish notice everything. You quickly discover another challenge. Looking into clear water can be surprisingly misleading. Fish appear slightly displaced from their true positions, because light bends as it passes between air and water. Your eyes deceive you. The river quietly knows better. Ancient fishers never described the physics of light refraction, of course. Yet through repeated experience they learned to aim slightly differently than instinct suggested. Practice corrected what vision alone could not. Experience once again defeats illusion. The morning breeze carries the fresh scent of reeds swaying gently along the riverbank. Tiny insects dance in warm patches of sunlight while distant herons stand almost perfectly still waiting with astonishing patience for their own breakfast. You watch the birds, not to copy them exactly, to notice what they notice. Much as your ancestors learned valuable lessons from forest animals, water birds occasionally offered clues about productive fishing places. A heron, standing motionless for long periods, rarely chooses its location randomly. Pelicans, cormorants, kingfishers, and ospreys reveal subtle hints about fish movement simply by following their own daily routines. Animals remain teachers. Water simply changes the classroom. Historians believe many prehistoric communities developed astonishing knowledge of fish migration. Certain species returned during predictable seasons, often traveling enormous distances upstream to spawn. Missing these brief opportunities meant waiting another entire year. Timing remained everything. The river kept its own calendar. As midday approaches, attention shifts from fish to the muddy shoreline, where clusters of shellfish rest partially buried beneath wet sand. Their rough shells appear ordinary enough. Perhaps too ordinary. Several experienced gatherers begin collecting them carefully into woven baskets, but they ignore many others, lying only a few steps away. You wonder why. At first glance, they seem identical. The answer arrives through quiet demonstration. One shell opens easily. Another smells unpleasant before it even reaches the basket. A third rests in stagnant water disconnected from the flowing river. None of those are collected. Modern science has revealed that shellfish can accumulate dangerous toxins produced by microscopic algae during certain conditions. These toxins often remain even after thorough cooking. Ancient people knew nothing about harmful algal blooms, yet coastal communities gradually recognized mysterious periods when shellfish caused illness despite appearing perfectly normal. They remembered the seasons. They remembered the places. Researchers continue debating exactly how prehistoric people recognized such invisible hazards. Some scholars suggest repeated seasonal patterns gradually became part of traditional knowledge. Others believe unusual watercolor bird behavior or changing weather may have provided subtle warning signs. The precise answer remains uncertain. The caution clearly survived. One fascinating example comes from indigenous communities along the Pacific coast of North America, where oral traditions warned against collecting shellfish during particular times of year. Long before marine biology explained harmful blooms, practical observation had already shaped dependable seasonal rules. Knowledge often arrives first. Explanation follows centuries later. The afternoon sun warms the shallow water until it feels pleasantly soft around your ankles. Smooth stones massage the bottoms of your feet as tiny fish dart curiously between them before vanishing into deeper pools. The river feels inviting. It deserves respect anyway. Attention now turns toward plants growing directly in the water. Broad-leaved lilies float peacefully across quiet pools while tall reeds sway gracefully along muddy banks. An elder carefully digs beneath one cluster. Hidden below lies a thick underground stem. Another meal. Aquatic plants provided valuable nutrition across many prehistoric landscapes. Lotus roots, cattail rhizomes, water chestnuts, and similar species offered dependable food when gathered correctly. Yet identifying them required every bit as much care as recognizing forest plants. Some nourished, others irritated. Several looked remarkably alike. You notice that the gatherers rarely harvest every plant they find. Many remain untouched. The marsh must survive. So must tomorrow. Anthropologists studying traditional fishing and gathering societies often remark upon sophisticated resource management practices that developed long before modern conservation. Rotating harvest areas, leaving immature plants untouched, and avoiding excessive collection helped maintain reliable food supplies across generations. Survival encouraged sustainability. Even without using that word, a curious story occasionally appears among archaeologists studying ancient coastlines. Certain shell middens, enormous piles of discarded shells accumulated over centuries, contain layers showing changes in harvesting habits over remarkably long periods. Some researchers believe these patterns reflect communities deliberately adapting to protect shellfish populations before they became depleted. Historians still debate the extent of such planning. The evidence continues growing. As evening approaches, baskets filled with fish-edible reeds, freshwater mussels, and carefully selected aquatic roots begin making their way back toward camp. The journey follows the river one final time, while sunlight turns the flowing water into ribbons of gold. The current never stops moving. Neither does knowledge. Back beside the familiar fire, fresh fish roast gently above glowing coals while reeds soften beneath warm stones placed near the edge of the flames. Their sweet earthy aroma mingles with wood smoke drifting peacefully into the cool evening sky. Children gather close once again, watching, learning, remembering. You look toward the quiet river disappearing into darkness beyond the trees. During daylight it appeared generous, almost welcoming. It was. It was also demanding. The ancient waters offered remarkable abundance, but only to those willing to understand invisible dangers, shifting seasons, hidden currents, and lessons carried quietly from one generation to the next. Tomorrow, however, the greatest challenge will not come from rivers or forests. It will come from something every living creature eventually faces: hunger itself. Section 12. Morning arrives beneath a sky the colour of weathered stone. The cheerful chorus of birds that has greeted you for so many days feels noticeably quieter. A dry wind slips across the valley, carrying dust instead of the familiar scent of fresh grass. Even the stream beside the camp flows a little lower than it did only weeks ago, exposing smooth rocks that once rested beneath moving water. Something is changing. Not suddenly, slowly enough that you almost miss it. The berry bushes you visited earlier in the season now hold little more than empty stems. The meadow where seeds once ripened has already surrendered most of its harvest. Many animals have begun following distant migrations, while others have become harder to track through increasingly dry forests. The land is resting. Your stomach is not. For perhaps the first time since entering this ancient world, you begin to understand that survival is not simply about recognizing safe food. Sometimes there is hardly any food at all. Hunger changes everything. You leave camp with the other gatherers, but the familiar confidence of previous mornings has softened into careful determination. People still observe patiently, they still compare leaves and examine roots. Yet today every discovery feels more important. Every edible plant carries greater value. Every mistake carries greater cost. The cool morning breeze brushes against your face while loose leaves tumble quietly across the forest floor. Their dry rustling replaces the lush whispers of early summer. Beneath your feet, the earth feels firmer, almost reluctant to surrender the moisture hidden below its surface. The season has become demanding. Nature often does. Archaeologists and climate historians have found abundant evidence that prehistoric communities regularly faced periods of scarcity. Droughts, unusually cold seasons, floods, insect outbreaks, failed migrations, and changing weather patterns could all reduce available food with remarkable speed. The ancient world was generous. It could also be unforgiving. You arrive beside a familiar patch of edible roots that supplied several successful meals earlier in the year. Today, many plants appear smaller than before. Several have withered entirely beneath the dry conditions. The elder kneels, not to harvest immediately, to think. The decision itself has become part of survival. Should these remaining roots be collected now while they still exist? Or should some remain untouched, hoping rain will return before the plants disappear altogether? There is no perfect answer, only difficult choices. Historians believe prehistoric communities constantly balanced immediate needs against future opportunities. Harvesting everything available might solve today's hunger while creating tomorrow's famine. Leaving too much behind risked losing it entirely to weather or hungry animals. The future remained uncertain. So did the present. A younger gatherer uncovers a cluster of bulbs hidden beneath loose soil. They are smaller than expected. Still edible. Still valuable. Nobody complains. Scarcity changes perspective. Meals once considered ordinary now seem remarkably fortunate. Modern psychologists have observed that prolonged hunger affects decision-making, patience, and risk assessment. Ancient people undoubtedly experienced these same biological pressures, although they understood them through lived experience rather than scientific explanation. An empty stomach whispers constantly. Sometimes it shouts. The challenge lies in deciding whether to listen. You continue deeper into the forest where familiar landmarks now reveal unfamiliar conditions. Mushrooms that appeared after recent rains have vanished beneath dry weather. Streams narrow into scattered pools. Even birds seem less numerous among the branches overhead. The silence feels heavier. Not frightening, simply empty. You notice something remarkable about the older gatherers. Although everyone feels the same hunger, they do not rush toward every unfamiliar plant that appears. Discipline survives. Even when comfort disappears, that restraint may have saved countless lives throughout human history. Imagine discovering a strange fruit after several difficult days with little food. Every instinct encourages immediate eating, yet experience quietly argues otherwise. Hunger increases danger, because hunger weakens caution. Researchers studying survival psychology frequently note that desperation often narrows attention toward immediate rewards while reducing careful judgment. Ancient communities likely recognized this pattern long before anyone studied the human brain. Perhaps not with scientific language, certainly with practical wisdom. One elder quietly breaks a small branch from an unfamiliar shrub before rubbing its leaves between weathered fingers. The smell is unpleasant. Nobody gathers the fruit, despite empty stomachs. That single decision represents generations of remembered experience overcoming powerful biological temptation. Knowledge defeats desperation, at least today. The afternoon sun burns through scattered clouds, warming the valley, until shimmering waves of heat dance above open grasslands. Dry herbs release sharp fragrances beneath your feet while insects buzz lazily through patches of stubborn wildflowers, still refusing to surrender to the season. Life continues, just more carefully. You pause beside a fallen tree where several children search beneath loose bark for insects. They smile excitedly after uncovering plump beetle larvae hidden inside the decaying wood. Their excitement surprises you, until you remember, food is food. Across much of human history, insects provided valuable protein, fat, and minerals during difficult periods and ordinary seasons alike. Today, more than 2 billion people around the world still regularly include insects in their diets. Ancient humans almost certainly did the same wherever suitable species could be gathered safely. Scarcity sometimes expands imagination. It also reveals forgotten possibilities. The children carefully place the larvae into small woven containers before continuing their search. No embarrassment surrounds the task. Only practicality. Researchers have uncovered archaeological evidence suggesting that prehistoric diets were often far broader than many modern people assume. Rather than depending upon only large animals or familiar fruits, communities frequently combined dozens or even hundreds of different food sources throughout the year. Flexibility became strength. Specialization invited risk. A fascinating question continues occupying archaeologists today. During severe shortages, did ancient people deliberately experiment with unfamiliar foods more often? Or did they rely even more heavily upon trusted species despite declining supplies? The evidence remains incomplete. Both strategies likely appeared under different circumstances. Human history rarely offers one universal solution. Late in the afternoon, the group reaches a grove of nut-bearing trees first visited weeks earlier. Most branches now stand empty beneath the bright sky, until someone looks down. The ground. Scattered among fallen leaves lie forgotten nuts overlooked by squirrels and birds. They are dusty, partially hidden and easily missed, yet perfectly edible. The youngest children discover many of them, not because they know more, because they look lower. Everyone smiles quietly. Sometimes fresh eyes notice old opportunities. Anthropologists studying traditional foraging often emphasize that successful gathering depends as much upon thoroughness as speed. Returning to familiar places repeatedly throughout changing seasons frequently reveals resources invisible during previous visits. Nothing is ever truly finished. The landscape keeps changing. So do the people exploring it. One particularly intriguing observation comes from studies of hunter-gatherer mobility. Rather than remaining in depleted areas until starvation forced movement, many communities traveled strategically between landscapes whose seasonal resources complemented one another. The forest declined, the coast improved, the river slowed, the hills flourished. Movement itself became a survival strategy. Historians still debate exactly how far prehistoric groups routinely traveled in response to changing food supplies. Some likely remained within well-known territories. Others undertook astonishing seasonal migrations spanning hundreds of miles. The answer depended upon place. As so often before, evening finally settles over the valley. The baskets returning to camp contain fewer foods than on previous days, yet they are far from empty. Small roots, overlooked nuts, edible insects, hardy greens, and several carefully chosen bulbs together create another meal, not a feast. Enough! Sometimes enough is remarkable. The familiar fire glows warmly against the growing darkness, while smoke rises peacefully toward a sky crowded with early stars. The scent of roasting roots mingles with toasted nuts and fragrant herbs, filling the camp with comforting reminders that another day has ended successfully. You realize something quietly profound. Human survival was never built solely upon abundance. It was shaped just as deeply by thoughtful responses to scarcity. Knowing what to eat mattered. Knowing how to think when food became scarce mattered even more. Tomorrow the journey will reveal another surprising truth. Some of humanity's safest meals were protected not by science, but by stories people believed. Section 13. The morning greets you with a gentle blanket of fog stretching low across the valley. Every tree appears softened around the edges as though the forest has decided to whisper instead of speak. Moisture gathers on dirt and spiderwebs suspended between branches, turning each delicate strand into a necklace of tiny silver beads. The air feels cool against your skin, carrying the comforting scent of wet leaves, wood smoke lingering from last night's fire, and something else. A faint sour aroma. Not unpleasant, just unfamiliar. You follow the scent toward the edge of the campsite, where several clay-lined pits have been carefully covered with broad leaves and flat stones. Nearby, woven baskets hold fruits gathered days earlier rather than yesterday. A few gourds rest in the shade, their contents quietly changing while no one appears particularly concerned. Nothing seems to be happening. In truth, something remarkable is taking place. Life is transforming life. Long before anyone imagined microscopes or discovered bacteria, tiny invisible organisms were already working tirelessly beside nearly every ancient campfire. They floated through the air, rested upon leaves, clung to fruit skins, and lived inside the soil beneath your feet. Nobody knew they existed. Everyone experienced their work. Today you begin discovering one of humanity's oldest invisible partnerships. It begins with waiting. One of the elders carefully uncovers a small container holding berries gathered several days ago. They no longer resemble the fresh fruit you remember picking. Their skins have softened. Their smell has become richer, carrying a pleasant tartness that makes your nose wrinkle ever so slightly. A younger child smiles. The change is expected. Instead of throwing the berries away, several are offered around the morning fire. Everyone tastes them calmly, almost casually. The flavor surprises you. Less sweet, more lively. The fruit has become something new. Modern science calls this fermentation a process in which microorganisms convert natural sugars into acids, gases, or alcohols. Yet your ancient companions know nothing of yeast cells or beneficial bacteria. What they know instead is beautifully practical. Some foods improve with time, if treated correctly. Others do not. Learning the difference took generations. Historians believe humans encountered fermentation accidentally countless times throughout prehistory. Fruit forgotten inside a shaded basket changed its flavour. Honey diluted by rain slowly transformed. Cooked roots left in cool earth developed unexpected aromas. Curiosity followed. Careful observation stayed close behind. Not every experiment succeeded. Enough did. The fire crackles softly while breakfast continues. A thick paste made from crushed seeds has developed a pleasantly tangy scent after resting overnight. Nearby, another container holds softened roots prepared several days before. Nothing appears spoiled, only transformed. Scientists now understand that fermentation often makes certain foods easier to digest, while creating environments less welcoming to harmful microbes. It can reduce some naturally occurring plant compounds that interfere with nutrition, preserve valuable calories for longer periods, and even produce entirely new flavors. Your ancestors never described acids or enzymes. They described results. People stayed healthy. The food lasted longer. That was explanation enough. The morning breeze gently stirs the broad leaves covering several underground storage pits. You notice that the pits remain surprisingly cool despite the warming sunlight above. Carefully chosen locations beneath shade help slow spoilage while protecting precious food from curious animals. Storage itself becomes another lesson. Finding food mattered. Keeping it mattered too. You remember the rich harvests of earlier weeks. At the time, gatherings seemed to end when baskets returned safely to camp. Now you realize it had only entered another stage. A meal saved for tomorrow may become even more valuable than one eaten today. Anthropologists studying traditional food preservation have documented astonishing methods developed long before pottery became widespread. Foods were buried, smoked, dried, fermented, soaked, frozen, or stored beneath cool streams, depending upon local climate and available materials. Different landscapes, similar ingenuity. You wander with an experienced woman toward a fallen oak where several mushrooms grow beneath damp moss. She studies them quietly before collecting only a few. The rest remain untouched. Not because they are poisonous, because they are too old. Freshness matters. Even among familiar foods, the earthy aroma rising from the forest floor blends with the smell of damp bark and rich soil. Tiny insects crawl between decaying leaves while a pair of robins hop confidently nearby, searching for worms disturbed by your footsteps. Decay surrounds you. So does renewal. The forest constantly reminds you that life never truly stands still. One fascinating reality of the natural world slowly becomes clearer. Humans are never alone when they eat. Trillions of microscopic organisms already live inside every healthy digestive system, quietly helping break down food and supporting countless biological processes. Your ancient companions know absolutely nothing about gut microbiomes, yet they unknowingly care for them every single day. Researchers increasingly believe that prehistoric diets rich in diverse plants, wild foods, and naturally fermented ingredients supported remarkably varied communities of beneficial intestinal microbes. Historians still debate exactly how these ancient microbiomes differed from those of modern people, but many scientists suspect the differences were substantial. The invisible world mattered, even before anyone imagined it. As midday sunlight filters gently through the trees, several children gather around a large wooden bowl where crushed nuts are being mixed with water into a thick paste. Instead of eating it immediately, the mixture is covered with broad leaves and carefully placed in the shade. One child looks puzzled. The elder simply smiles. Tomorrow, patience returns once again. By now that lesson feels wonderfully familiar. Many ancient foods demanded time not because people enjoyed waiting, but because waiting improved safety, flavor, or digestibility. The forest rewarded those willing to let natural processes finish their quiet work. Time became an ingredient, perhaps the most important one. Researchers continue discussing exactly how widespread intentional fermentation became during deep prehistory. Some scholars argue that accidental discoveries gradually evolved into reliable traditions long before farming began. Others suggest systematic fermentation expanded dramatically only after settled communities developed. The evidence tells an incomplete story. The conversation remains lively. Either way, humanity eventually learned to cooperate with invisible partners it could neither see nor fully understand. The afternoon grows pleasantly warm. Bees drift lazily among flowering herbs while the familiar scent of smoke curls upward from a slow-burning cooking fire. Nearby strips of fish, collected yesterday, continue drying above gentle heat, their surfaces gradually changing texture as moisture slowly disappears. Preservation takes many forms. Each reflects careful observation. A curious smell suddenly catches your attention from another basket resting beneath a tree. Several fruits inside have clearly fermented much longer than intended. Their aroma is sharp, almost intoxicating. The adults laugh softly. These will not become today's meal. Across history, naturally fermented fruits occasionally produce small amounts of alcohol through the activity of wild yeast. Some archaeologists have wondered whether prehistoric people encountered such discoveries long before intentional brewing developed. Historians still disagree about how often this occurred and what ancient communities thought of these unexpected transformations. The evidence remains uncertain. The possibility remains delightful. Late in the afternoon, everyone gathers to prepare the evening meal. Some foods are fresh from today's walk. Others have rested quietly for days. A few have been drying beside smoke since yesterday. Together they create a meal richer and more varied than any single day's gathering could provide. No one explained the science. There is no need. Generations have already tested these methods through careful experience. Success became tradition. Tradition became wisdom. As darkness settles gently over the valley, the familiar fire glows warmly against the cool night air. The forest beyond fades into shadow while stars appear one by one above the treetops. The scent of roasted roots mingles with tangy preserved berries, smoked fish and fragrant herbs drifting lazily through the camp. You smile quietly. Every meal you've shared has contained companions too small to see. Invisible helpers have worked patiently beside humanity for countless thousands of years, asking for no recognition, while quietly transforming ordinary foods into safer, longer-lasting, and sometimes even more nourishing meals. Tomorrow, however, another kind of knowledge awaits, not hidden beneath the soil, not floating in the air, but living inside the stories people tell around the fire. Section 14. The evening rain has washed the world clean. When morning finally arrives, every leaf glistens beneath the first rays of sunlight. Water drips gently from high branches, striking the forest floor with soft, rhythmic taps that blend almost perfectly with the distant song of a thrush welcoming the new day. The air feels cool and wonderfully fresh, carrying the scent of rain-soaked bark, damp moss, and the familiar smoke that still rises lazily from last night's fading via. The camp wakes slowly. No one seems eager to rush. Instead, people gather quietly around the glowing embers while breakfast is prepared. Children sit close beside parents and grandparents. Hunters repair worn spear shafts. Gatherers weave fresh baskets from reeds collected beside the river. And while their hands remain busy, and their voices begin telling stews. At first they sound like ordinary tales. A clever fox that ignored a tempting fruit, a mountain spirit who punished greedy travelers, a raven that warned a family away from a poisonous marsh. The children listen carefully. So do the adults. You begin to realize that these stories are doing something far more important than entertaining the morning audience. They are quietly protecting lives. Long before written recipes or illustrated field guides, human communities found another remarkable way to preserve survival knowledge. They wrapped practical lessons inside memorable stories, songs, rituals, and traditions that children could carry for an entire lifetime. Memory loves story. Oh, I dreamed. The human mind always has. Imagine trying to remember hundreds of edible plants using nothing more than isolated facts. Now imagine those same plants becoming characters inside tales repeated every winter beside a warm fire. One method fades, the other endures. Anthropologists studying oral cultures have repeatedly observed that stories often preserve surprisingly accurate ecological information across many generations. A legend describing a dangerous valley may also identify areas prone to flooding. A tale about an angry forest spirit may quietly discourage children from eating poisonous berries growing nearby. The lesson hides inside the story. The story keeps the lesson alive. You accompany several families into the forest where today's gathering begins beneath towering oak trees. Before anyone collects the first handful of nuts, the eldest woman pauses for a brief moment of silence. No elaborate ceremony follows, just gratitude. Then the work begins. To modern eyes, such rituals might appear purely symbolic, yet historians increasingly recognize that simple traditions often reinforce practical habits. A short pause before gathering encouraged careful observation. Shared routines reduced hurried mistakes. Repeating the same actions season after season strengthened memory almost effortlessly. Rituals slowed people down. Sometimes that alone prevented accidents. Nearby, a young boy reaches toward a bright cluster of unfamiliar berries. Before anyone stops him directly, his older sister softly whispers the name of a well-known story. The boy freezes. His hand withdraws immediately. Nothing more needs to be said. Whatever tale they both learned years earlier has already done its work. Researchers still debate exactly how prehistoric myths developed, but many scholars suspect practical knowledge frequently blended with spiritual belief. The distinction between survival advice and sacred tradition may not have been nearly as sharp as modern people often imagine. Perhaps it never needed to be. Both protected the community. The forest welcomes you deeper beneath its leafy canopy. Warm sunlight filters through thousands of green leaves, painting shifting patterns across the ground, while a gentle breeze carries the sweet fragrance of flowering herbs hidden among fallen branches. The world feels peaceful. Stories make it understandable. One elder stops beside a towering tree scarred by lightning many seasons ago. Children gather eagerly while she traces the blackened bark with weathered fingers. The tree itself becomes part of another story. A reminder: never gather mushrooms here after heavy rain. Why? The explanation arrives through a tale about mischievous woodland spirits who hide sickness beneath beautiful caps whenever storms awaken the forest. The children smile. They will remember. Modern science might explain that changing moisture conditions influence mushroom growth and that identifying safe species remains exceptionally difficult. The ancient story reaches exactly the same practical conclusion. Stay away. Different language, identical wisdom. Anthropologists have documented countless examples where indigenous stories preserve detailed ecological observations. Certain birds announce fish migrations. Particular stars signal the arrival of edible plants. Seasonal ceremonies coincide remarkably well with flowering cycles, animal breeding periods, or changing weather patterns. The stories sound magical. Their timing proves remarkably practical. As midday approaches, everyone reaches a familiar meadow where edible greens grow abundantly after recent rainfall. Before harvesting begins, several younger gatherers carefully leave the first healthy plants untouched. You wonder why? An elder smiles gently. Tomorrow needs them. Some traditions instructed people never to harvest every plant from one place. Others encouraged leaving the first fruits, the last roots, or the strongest seed-bearing specimens behind. While spiritual explanations often accompanied these customs, the ecological benefits become wonderfully obvious. Nature receives time to recover. The next generation receives another harvest. Researchers continue discussing how much ancient conservation emerged from conscious planning versus long-term cultural tradition. The two possibilities are not mutually exclusive. A tradition may begin practically, later becoming the sacred, or perhaps the opposite occurred. History often refuses simple categories. The afternoon breeze drifts across tall grasses carrying the warm scent of wild sage and sun-baked earth. Butterflies float lazily between flowers, while bees continue their patient work from blossom to blossom. Everything feels connected. The stories say so. The landscape quietly agrees. One particularly fascinating tradition appears during the afternoon meal. Before children sample a newly ripened fruit, the oldest woman tastes it first. Only after several quiet moments does everyone else begin eating. Perhaps this custom developed from respect for age. Perhaps it evolved because experienced gatherers recognized subtle differences younger people overlooked. Historians still argue. The reason has vanished. The tradition remained. Sometimes customs survive long after their original purpose has faded from memory. A family may continue avoiding certain foods during specific seasons without fully remembering why their ancestors began doing so centuries earlier. Yet the behavior itself continues offering protection. Culture becomes memory. Memory becomes survival. A fascinating example comes from food taboos found across many parts of the ancient world. Certain shellfish were avoided during warm months. Particular animals remained untouched during breeding seasons. Some plants could only be harvested after specific ceremonies. Modern researchers occasionally discover ecological or health benefits hidden beneath these ancient customs. Not always. Surprisingly often, the exact origins remain subjects of lively scholarly discussion. Late in the afternoon, clouds gather gently above the distant hills while cool shadows stretch across the forest floor. The day's gathering comes to an end, and everyone begins the familiar walk back toward camp carrying baskets comfortably filled with carefully chosen foods. Children chatter happily, retelling the morning's stories, adding dramatic details, laughing at imaginary spirits. Without realizing it, they are rehearsing survival lessons that may one day protect their own families. The stories continue walking. Long after the storytellers grow old, back beside the evening fire, flames dance softly beneath an increasingly brilliant sky filled with stars. Smoke carries the rich aroma of roasting roots, toasted nuts, fragrant herbs, and freshly gathered greens. Faces glow warmly in the firelight while voices rise and fall in relaxed conversation. Soon another story begins, then another. Each one carries more than entertainment, more than belief, more than tradition, hidden. Inside every tale rests a carefully preserved piece of humanity's long conversation with the natural world, a warning wrapped inside wonder, a lesson disguised as adventure, a memory strong enough to survive thousands of winters without ever touching paper. You look around the circle, nobody's reading, yet everyone is learning. Tomorrow you will discover that some of the strangest foods in the ancient world were not feared forever. With enough patience, even the most unlikely meals could become trusted companions. Section 15. The dawn arrives wrapped in golden light. A thin veil of mist rises from the forest floor, drifting lazily between ancient tree trunks before dissolving beneath the warming sun. The air feels wonderfully still, interrupted only by the soft buzzing of bees already visiting clusters of wildflowers. Somewhere beyond the trees, a wood pigeon calls with slow, rhythmic patience, while the familiar scent of wood smoke gently lingers over the camp. Another day begins, another meal awaits. Yet if someone from the modern world suddenly appeared beside you this morning, they might refuse breakfast altogether. Not because the food is dangerous, because it looks unusual. You smile quietly at the thought. What feels strange depends almost entirely upon what you already know. An experienced gatherer leads you toward a fallen oak whose trunk has slowly surrendered to years of rain insects and patient decay. The wood has become soft enough to crumble beneath gentle pressure, releasing the rich, earthy fragrance that always follows a forest returning itself to the soil. The log seems lifeless. It is anything but. Carefully peeling back loose bark, the gatherer reveals dozens of pale, plump beetle larvae nestled comfortably inside the damp wood. Several children grin. They were hoping to find them. Tiny hands eagerly begin collecting the larvae into small woven baskets while chatting happily among themselves. Nobody hesitates. Nobody looks disgusted. To them, this is simply breakfast. Across much of modern society, insects often inspire discomfort before curiosity. Yet throughout human history and still today across many parts of the world, insects have provided valuable sources of protein, fat, vitamins, and minerals. More than 2,000 edible insect species have been documented by scientists, and many remain traditional foods for millions of people. Perspective shapes appetite, far more than biology alone. You watch one of the older women carefully sort through the basket. Not every larva remains. Some are returned beneath the bark. The smallest, the youngest, enough are left behind to continue growing. The lesson requires no explanation. Take what you need. Leave tomorrow's meal alive. Anthropologists have repeatedly observed sustainable harvesting practices like these among traditional food-gathering societies. Long before anyone spoke about environmental management, practical experience encouraged restraint because exhausting a reliable food source benefited no one. Patience fed the future. Greed shortened it. The morning continues as your group travels deeper into the woodland until towering trees gradually give way to cooler, damper ground. Moss blankets fallen branches while mushrooms emerge from shaded earth like quiet little umbrellas after recent rain. Their shapes are astonishingly varied. Some resemble tiny bowls. Others rise like elegant towers. Several glow almost golden beneath scattered sunlight. Beautiful, potentially dangerous. You already know enough not to rush forward. Instead, you watch the elder. Only 3 mushrooms are collected. Dozens remain untouched. Modern mycologists often joke that mushroom identification rewards humility because confident mistakes can prove serious. Ancient gatherers certainly reached the same conclusion without scientific classifications. Generations of careful observation transformed only a small number of local species into trusted foods. Everything else remained uncertain. Uncertainty deserved respect. Researchers believe mushrooms probably occupied very different places in prehistoric diets depending upon geography and local knowledge. Some communities may have relied upon them frequently during favourable seasons. Others likely ignored them almost completely. Historians still debate the extent. The evidence varies widely. One fascinating possibility continues attracting scholarly interest. Certain mushrooms possess medicinal properties alongside nutritional value. Whether prehistoric communities intentionally distinguished medicinal fungi from edible ones remains uncertain, although traditional knowledge in many later cultures demonstrates remarkably sophisticated understanding. The forest kept many secrets. Patient people uncovered some, not all. The cool morning breeze carries the earthy aroma of damp moss, mixed with fresh pine resin as you continue walking toward a rocky hillside overlooking the valley below. Tiny lizards dart between warm stones, while butterflies drift effortlessly across patches of flowering thyme. Here another unexpected meal awaits. Dark green sheets cling tightly to sunlit rocks where trickling water keeps them constantly moist. At first glance, they hardly resemble food. One child begins gathering them anyway. These simple plants, early forms of edible algae or similar aquatic growths in suitable environments, illustrate another remarkable truth about human diets. Foods that appear entirely ordinary to one community may seem unimaginable to another. Familiarity changes everything. Repeated success creates trust. You remember your first morning in this ancient world when every unfamiliar plant inspired uncertainty. Now you find yourself recognizing dozens of species almost without thinking. Knowledge quietly reshapes taste. So does experience. As midday approaches, your journey leads toward the river visited several days earlier. Along the muddy banks, broad stands of reeds sway gently in the breeze while patches of edible water plants emerge from shallow pools. Nearby grows another curious food. Seaweed would nourish coastal peoples. Freshwater greens serve those living inland. Modern nutrition research has revealed these plants to be surprisingly rich in minerals and other valuable nutrients. Ancient communities knew nothing of iodine, potassium, or trace elements. They knew the food worked. That was enough. An elder carefully washes several long green strands before laying them across warm stones near a small cooking fire. The gentle heat softens their texture while releasing a mild, pleasantly salty aroma. You taste a small piece, unexpectedly satisfying. Another strange food quietly becomes familiar. Scientists increasingly recognize that humans possess remarkable dietary flexibility compared with many other large mammals. Rather than specializing narrowly, our ancestors gradually learned to safely exploit an extraordinary variety of food sources across dramatically different environments. This flexibility became power. It also became resilience. The afternoon carries you toward open grasslands alive with the gentle chirping of countless insects. Grasshoppers leap energetically through knee-high vegetation, disappearing almost as quickly as they appear. Several children begin laughing. A game begins. Who can catch the most? Within minutes, woven baskets contain dozens of large grasshoppers destined for the evening fire. Today they are plentiful. Plentiful. Tomorrow they may not be. Across Africa, Asia, Australia, and the Americas, grasshoppers, locusts, crickets, and similar insects have long provided dependable seasonal foods. Properly roasted, many become pleasantly crisp while offering impressive nutritional value. Modern prejudice. Ancient practicality. The contrast feels surprisingly striking. Historians continued discussing exactly how frequently prehistoric people relied upon insects. Direct archaeological evidence remains difficult to preserve because delicate insect remains rarely survive thousands of years underground. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially in archaeology. One particularly intriguing discovery comes from microscopic analyses of ancient dental plaque. Tiny food particles trapped within hardened plaque occasionally preserve traces of plants, fungi, and other unexpected foods eaten thousands of years ago. Your own teeth become historical records, quite unintentionally. Late in the afternoon, everyone pauses beneath the welcome shade of a broad oak while today's unusual harvest is sorted carefully into separate baskets. Mushrooms rest beside edible greens. Insects remain apart from tender shoots. Aquatic plants dry gently in the warm breeze. Everything has its place. Knowledge increased it. Without that knowledge, the baskets would appear wonderfully confusing. The return journey feels peaceful. Sunlight softens into warm amber tones, while birds begin settling into evening routines among the trees. The comforting smell of smoke reaches you long before the camp itself comes into view. Soon the evening fire transforms another collection of unlikely ingredients into a satisfying meal. The beetle larvae roast until their outer surfaces become lightly crisp. Grasshoppers toast gently beside hot stones. Mushrooms soften above glowing embers while fresh herbs perfume the surrounding air. Children eat happily. Adults smile. Nobody considers the meal unusual, because it isn't. Around the fire, conversation drifts lazily beneath an increasingly brilliant sky, scattered with stars. You look at the food surrounding you and realize how completely your own perspective has changed during these many days. What once seemed strange, now feels ordinary. Perhaps that has always been one of humanity's greatest strengths. Not merely discovering new foods, learning to trust them carefully, testing them patiently, remembering them faithfully, passing them quietly to those who came next. Tomorrow another lesson waits beyond the firelight, because some of humanity's greatest discoveries were born not from success, but from unforgettable mistakes. Section 16. The morning arrived beneath a sky painted with soft streaks of pale orange and gentle lavender. The night's coolness still lingers beneath the trees, and tiny beads of dew cling stubbornly to spiderwebs stretched between low branches. A light breeze carries the familiar fragrance of wood smoke, crushed pine needles, and damp earth awakening beneath the first warmth of the rising sun. Everything feels peaceful, almost reassuringly so. After many days in this ancient world, the forest no longer seems like an endless puzzle waiting to trap the unwary. Familiar berry bushes greet you like old neighbours. Well-travelled paths wind naturally between towering oaks. Even the calls of distant birds have begun sounding less mysterious than comforting. Confidence has quietly arrived. Confidence is useful. It can also become dangerous. One of the oldest hunters pauses before leaving camp this morning. He kneels beside the fading embers of last night's fire, gently turning a small stone over in his weathered hands. The younger people gather around him. No hunt begins yet. Instead, he tells a story. Not one about heroes, not one about great victories, a mistake. Many years ago, he explains through calm gestures and familiar words, a young gatherer became certain that two nearly identical roots belonged to the same harmless plant. They did not. The illness came quickly. The lesson lasted forever. Silence follows. Nobody interrupts. The story itself has become part of the morning's preparation. Across human history, remarkable discoveries often emerged through success, yet countless equally valuable lessons arrived through failure. Ancient communities could not afford to ignore painful experiences. Every mistake, however unfortunate, became precious information if it prevented someone else from repeating it. Failure became memory. Memory became protection. Historians sometimes describe human culture as cumulative knowledge, where every generation builds upon discoveries made by those who came before. That idea applies just as strongly to mistakes as it does to triumphs. Someone suffers once. Many people avoid suffering later. The mathematics of survival slowly improve. You begin walking through the forest while reflecting upon how astonishingly fragile prehistoric knowledge must have been. There were no books preserving botanical observations, no written records documenting dangerous mushrooms, no permanent libraries describing poisonous fish or deceptive berries. Everything depended upon people remembering. Perfectly. The realization feels humbling. One forgotten detail could alter countless futures. The forest greets you with its familiar orchestra. Woodpeckers drum patiently against old trees, while insects hum gently among patches of wildflowers. Somewhere nearby, squirrels chatter loudly as they race along branches high overhead. Nature sounds unchanged. Human understanding quietly evolves. You stop beside a familiar patch of edible greens gathered several weeks earlier. A younger child confidently reaches toward them before suddenly hesitating. Something feels different. The leaves appear slightly smaller than before. The elder smiles. The child has noticed. Not every lesson concerns danger. Some concern observation itself. Perhaps recent dry weather changed the plant's appearance. Perhaps insects have eaten their edges. Perhaps the season has simply advanced. Knowledge remains alive. It keeps adapting. Researchers studying expertise often note that experienced professionals rarely stop learning, even after decades of practice. Ancient gatherers almost certainly shared this quality. Every unusual season, every unexpected sudden storm, every unfamiliar migration added fresh information to existing understanding. Experience never truly finished growing, neither did wisdom. The morning path leads toward a rocky hillside where a cluster of young adults practices identifying plants under the watchful eye of two elders. The exercise feels almost playful. One person points, the others decide. Safe, uncertain, leave it alone. Answers come quietly, sometimes correctly, sometimes not. When someone chooses incorrectly, nobody laughs. Instead, everyone kneels together. The plant is examined again. Leaves, stem, roots, smell, growing place. Every feature receives calm attention until the difference becomes unmistakable. Mistakes become teachers, provided they happen safely. Modern educational research strongly supports this gentle approach. People often remember corrected errors more effectively than information learned perfectly the first time. Ancient communities likely discovered the same truth simply through everyday experience. Correction strengthens memory. Shame weakens curiosity. The distinction matters enormously. By midday, warm sunlight pours across the valley, while the scent of flowering herbs drifts lazily through the air. Bees wander peacefully between blossoms, unconcerned by the quiet conversations unfolding nearby. The elder points toward a patch of berries. You recognize them instantly. Then he points toward another. They look almost identical. Almost. This time you notice the subtle difference before anyone speaks. The leaves grow opposite instead of alternating. The berries hang in tighter clusters. The stems carry faint reddish markings. You smile quietly. Yesterday's lessons are becoming today's instincts. That quiet transformation may represent one of humanity's greatest achievements. Survival knowledge gradually shifts from conscious effort into what's effortless recognition. Not because the world grows simpler, because experience reshapes perception. Archaeologists occasionally uncover evidence suggesting prehistoric communities revisited the same campsites over many generations. Layer upon layer of discarded tools, cooking fires and food remains accumulated across centuries. The same places, different people, shared lessons. Imagine the conversations repeated beside those fires. This mushroom made your grandfather ill. These roots saved us during the Great Drought. Never gather shellfish after the river turns cloudy. The words vanished. Their consequences remained. Researchers still debate how prehistoric communities responded when entirely new environments forced them beyond familiar territories. Did previous knowledge transfer easily, or did dangerous mistakes become temporarily more common? The evidence suggests both likely occurred. Old wisdom travelled. New landscapes demanded new learning. Human adaptability depended upon balancing confidence with humility. A fascinating example comes from the archaeological record of early human migrations into Australia and the Americas. As people entered unfamiliar continents filled with plants and animals unlike anything previously encountered, they somehow built entirely new systems of ecological knowledge within remarkably short evolutionary periods. The achievement feels extraordinary. It almost certainly included mistakes, some forgotten, some unforgettable. The afternoon breeze freshens as clouds drift slowly across the bright blue sky. Children gather fallen branches for tonight's fire while several adults inspect drying fish prepared days earlier. One strip appears spoiled. Without hesitation, it's discarded. Nobody argues. Nobody attempts to save it. The loss feels unfortunate. The risk feels greater. This simple moment reveals another kind of wisdom. Learning from mistakes also means recognizing when previous success no longer guarantees future safety. Yesterday's food, today's danger. Conditions change. Judgment must change with them. Anthropologists studying traditional food practices frequently observe that experienced gatherers remain remarkably willing to abandon familiar habits when unusual circumstances arise. A trusted stream becomes contaminated after flooding. A reliable plant behaves differently following drought. Flexibility protects survival. Rigidity invites trouble. One particularly interesting idea discussed by cognitive scientists is that humans may possess an unusual capacity to learn socially from other people's mistakes rather than only personal experience. While many animals benefit primarily from direct trial and error, people readily absorb cautionary lessons through observation and storytelling. That difference changes everything. One person's failure, 100 people's education. As evening slowly settles across the valley, the familiar fire welcomes everyone home once again. The comforting scent of roasting roots, smoked fish, and fragrant herbs fills the cool air while glowing embers cast warm light across thoughtful faces. The morning's story returns naturally during supper. This time younger voices retell it, adding details, repeating warnings, making absolutely certain they remember. The mistake no longer belongs to one individual. It belongs to the whole community, and therefore it belongs to the future. You sit quietly beside the fire watching sparks rise gently toward a sky overflowing with stars. Somewhere beyond the darkness, countless generations before you made careful choices, bold discoveries and painful mistakes that gradually built humanity's enormous library of survival. Most of their names disappeared. Their lessons did not. Tomorrow those lessons will travel farther still, because knowledge, like people, rarely stays in one place forever. Section 17. The morning begins with an unfamiliar sound. It is not the steady tapping of a woodpecker. It is not the cheerful chatter of children waking beside the fire. It is not even the distant murmur of the river flowing patiently toward the sea. It is laughter, voices you do not recognize. You step from the shelter into the cool morning air where a gentle layer of mist still hangs over the valley. Smoke rises lazily from several campfires instead of just one. Beyond the clearing, another small group of people has arrived during the night, their woven baskets, rolled hides, and carefully carried tools resting neatly beside them. They are strangers, yet nobody appears frightened, only curious. The two groups greet one another, calmly exchanging smiles, familiar gestures, and quiet conversation, before settling together around the growing warmth of the morning fire. The forest suddenly feels larger, not because the trees have changed, because the world has. For much of human history, prehistoric communities were never completely isolated. Families traveled, hunting parties crossed familiar boundaries, seasonal gatherings brought distant groups together. Rivers became natural highways, while coastlines, valleys, and mountain passes quietly connected people separated by many days of walking. Knowledge traveled too, sometimes farther than anyone imagined. You notice that the newcomers carry foods you have never seen before. One woven basket contains unfamiliar seeds darker than any gathered in your own valley. Another holds dried fruits with wrinkled skins and an intensely sweet aroma. A hunter carefully unwraps bundles of smoked fish, prepared using methods slightly different from those practiced in your camp. Everything feels both familiar and wonderfully new. An older woman from your group examines one of the strange fruits carefully before smiling with quiet recognition. Not because she has seen it before, because someone once described it, perhaps many summers ago, perhaps around another distant fire. Stories travel. People carry them. Food follows close behind. Historians and archaeologists have uncovered growing evidence that prehistoric communities exchanged materials, ideas, and practical knowledge across surprisingly large distances. Stone suitable for toolmaking sometimes travelled hundreds of miles before finally reaching archaeological sites. Marine shells appear far inland. Rare pigments crossed mountain ranges. Objects moved. Information almost certainly moved with them. You sit quietly while both groups begin sharing breakfast. Conversation flows, slowly interrupted by the moments when someone holds up an unfamiliar root or seed for everyone else to examine. Nobody rushes to taste. Old habits remain. First comes observation, then questions, then careful comparison. One elderly hunter points toward the unfamiliar seeds before drawing shapes in the dirt with a smooth stick. The visitors nod enthusiastically. Although their spoken words differ, slightly shared experience bridges the gap remarkably well. The seeds ripen after heavy autumn rains. Not before. They grow only in open hillsides, never beneath dense forest. Roasting removes their bitterness. The lesson crosses cultures. Without writing a single word, modern anthropology frequently emphasizes that knowledge exchange between neighboring groups dramatically increases resilience. Communities experiencing drought, poor hunting, or environmental change benefit enormously when alternative foods already exist within neighboring traditions. One valley struggles. Another remembers. Everyone gains. The morning breeze carries the pleasant fragrance of freshly crushed herbs mixed with wood smoke curling upward through tall pine branches. Birds continue singing as though nothing unusual has happened, while squirrels scamper confidently across fallen logs between both camps. Nature welcomes everyone equally. Humans choose whether to share. One young visitor carries a woven basket unlike any you have previously seen. Its tighter weave protects tiny seeds from slipping through the gaps. Several women from your camp gather around, turning the basket gently in their hands while quietly admiring its craftsmanship. Soon someone begins weaving another. Knowledge changes hand without anyone losing it. That simple truth may represent one of humanity's greatest strengths. Unlike food sharing, knowledge rarely leaves the original owner with less. Instead, everyone possesses more. Archaeologists have discovered remarkably similar stone tool styles appearing across enormous regions during different prehistoric periods. Historians continue debating exactly how these similarities developed. Some emphasize migration. Others point toward regular contact and cultural exchange between neighboring communities. The answer likely includes both. Human history often grows through many overlapping journeys. By midday, several experienced gatherers leave together for a nearby hillside. Members from both communities walk side by side, pointing toward different plants as they travel. The comparisons begin almost immediately. This one, a gentle shake of the head. This one, smiles, nods, laughter. Soon everyone is kneeling around a patch of unfamiliar greens while discussing tiny differences in leaf shape, stem color, and growing conditions. The forest becomes a shared classroom. No competition appears, only curiosity. Researchers studying indigenous ecological knowledge often describe these exchanges as extraordinarily sophisticated. Communities adapted outside ideas carefully, rather than accepting every suggestion immediately. A food trusted elsewhere must still prove itself here. Different climates, different soils, different risks. Wisdom remained local, even while learning travelled. The afternoon sun warms smooth rocks scattered across the hillside until they radiate gentle heat through the soles of your feet. The scent of flowering thyme rises with every careful step while butterflies drift lazily across patches of golden grass. A visitor kneels beside an unfamiliar shrub. The berries look promising. Your own group's elders hesitate. The visitors smile reassuringly. Then they demonstrate. First, the berries are gently washed. Next, they are lightly crushed. Finally, they are cooked slowly beside a small fire built beneath a flat stone. Only then are they eaten. Another lesson arrives. Preparation matters as much as identification. Perhaps your people would have ignored these berries forever without today's meeting. Perhaps the visitors once learned the same lesson from strangers who arrived many generations earlier. Knowledge forms chains, stretching farther than memory alone. One fascinating archaeological discovery comes from obsidian, a volcanic glass prized for making exceptionally sharp tools. Chemical analysis has shown that some obsidian artifacts travelled hundreds of miles from their geological sources. The stone crossed great distances. The people carrying it surely exchanged far more than rocks. Recipes, warnings, hunting techniques, seasonal calendars, plant knowledge. The conversations vanished. The evidence remained. Historians still argue about how frequently large seasonal gatherings occurred during different periods of prehistory. Some researchers envision relatively isolated bands meeting only occasionally. Others suggest much richer social networks connected neighbouring communities through marriage trade ceremony and shared resource management. The archaeological record leaves room for both possibilities. Human societies have always been wonderfully varied. Late in the afternoon, children from both groups invent games together beside the stream. Without realising it, they begin exchanging knowledge even faster than the adults. One child proudly points toward an edible flower. Another responds by revealing a tasty seed hidden inside a familiar grass. Neither guards the information. Both gain something new. Learning becomes play. Play becomes memory. Anthropologists often note that children serve as surprisingly effective carriers of cultural ideas because curiosity encourages experimentation. While friendships cross social boundaries, adults sometimes maintain. Tomorrow's traditions begin today, often during games. As the sun slowly sinks toward the western hills, preparations begin for a shared evening meal. Foods from both communities rest side by side around the glowing fire. Familiar roasted roots accompany unfamiliar seeds. Smoked river fish joins dried mountain berries. Fresh herbs from one valley, seasoned foods gathered in another. The meal tells a story, not of competition, of cooperation. The smoke rising into the darkening sky carries dozens of different aromas woven together into one comforting fragrance. Conversation flows easily now, punctuated by laughter, thoughtful questions, and quiet demonstrations around the firelight. You look around the circle and realize something quietly extraordinary. Humanity did not survive because every community solved every problem alone. It survived because good ideas traveled, carefully, patiently, one trusted conversation at a time. Somewhere beyond these distant hills, another group is surely discovering a new route, a safer cooking method, or a better way to preserve fish through winter. Perhaps one day, their wisdom will find its way here too. Tomorrow, however, your journey will turn toward mysteries that no traveller, elder, or storyteller has yet completely solved. Even today, some ancient meals still keep their secrets. Section 18. The morning arrives with an unusual stillness. A pale layer of mist hangs over the valley, softening every hill and tree, until the landscape seems to exist halfway between memory and dream. Even the birds delay their morning chorus, offering only an occasional call that fades gently into the cool air. The scent of damp earth rises from the forest floor, mingling with fading campfire smoke and the faint fragrance of crushed herbs beneath your feet. The world feels ancient today, older somehow, as though it is quietly reminding you that not every story survives. For many days you have followed a path illuminated by the wisdom of countless forgotten people. Their careful choices, patient observations, and shared traditions have guided nearly every step of your journey. Yet there are places where even those footsteps disappear. Questions remain, and they have remained for thousands of years. You leave the campsite with the familiar gathering party, but today your attention lingers on smaller things. A broken shell beside the river, charred seeds resting near an old fire pit, animal bones scattered beneath a rocky overhang. Ordinary objects, extraordinary clues. If someone living many thousands of years in the future were to discover these traces, what story could they truly tell? Not the conversation, not the laughter, not the quiet warnings exchanged between grandparents and curious children. Those disappear almost immediately. Instead, only fragments remain. Fragments become history. Modern archaeology resembles an enormous puzzle assembled from astonishingly incomplete pieces. Every charred seed-worn stone tool, broken bone, or grain of ancient pollen offers another tiny glimpse into lives that can no longer speak for themselves. The silence feels profound, yet surprisingly generous. You kneel beside the remains of yesterday's cooking fire. Most of the ashes will soon scatter beneath the wind. Tiny pieces of charcoal, however, may rest within the soil for thousands of years. One forgotten ember, one future discovery. Scientists have learned remarkable amounts about prehistoric diets through microscopic remains preserved inside ancient fireplaces. Burned seeds, nutshell fragments, fish bones, and even starch grains trapped within cooking stones quietly survive long after every storyteller has vanished. Fire remembered. When people could not, the morning breeze carries the soft scent of damp pine needles while sunlight gradually filters through the trees. Warm rays illuminate tiny insects already beginning another busy day beneath broad green leaves. Nature continues. Evidence quietly accumulates. One of the younger gatherers pauses beside a smooth stone marked with shallow grooves worn into its surface. To your companions, it is simply a familiar tool used for grinding seeds. To future archaeologists, it may become a mystery. Was it used only for food, for medicine, for pigments? Perhaps all three. Researchers often discover ancient tools carrying microscopic traces of multiple materials, making simple answers surprisingly difficult. A single stone may have prepared edible roots one season and medicinal herbs the next. Objects rarely tell complete stories. People once supplied the missing chapters. Those voices have fed. You continue toward a limestone cave overlooking the valley. Cool air flows gently from its entrance, carrying the earthy smell of damp rock untouched by sunlight. Water drips rhythmically from the ceiling, somewhere deep inside, echoing softly through the darkness. The cave feels timeless. It almost is. Caves preserve remarkable evidence because their sheltered environments protect delicate materials from wind and weather. Ancient footprints, bits of woven fibre plant, remains charcoal, and animal bones sometimes survive here when they would vanish almost everywhere else. They become accidental time capsules, waiting patiently. Archaeologists have uncovered astonishing discoveries inside prehistoric caves. Traces of wild grains ground into flour, ancient cooking hearths, preserved plant fibres and residues clinging to stone tools that reveal meals prepared tens of thousands of years ago. Each discovery answers one question, then raises three more. You notice an elder gently touching soot-blackened stone near the cave wall. Countless fires have burned here across generations, yet nobody remembers the very first family who discovered this shelter. Memory has limits. The earth remembers longer. One particularly fascinating mystery concerns prehistoric plant use. Scientists know early humans consumed far more species than archaeology has yet identified. Delicate leaves, soft fruits, flowers, and many roots simply decay too quickly to leave reliable evidence. Absence creates puzzles, not proof. Researchers sometimes call this a preservation bias. Hard materials such as bone and stone survive readily, while softer foods quietly disappear. As a result, ancient diets almost certainly appear narrower in the archaeological record than they truly were. History hides as much as it reveals, perhaps more. The afternoon carries you toward a grassy hillside where countless tiny flowers sway beneath a warm breeze. Bees drift patiently between blossoms while butterflies float almost effortlessly above the meadow. It seems impossible that such beauty leaves so little behind. A flower eaten today may vanish forever. No trace, no fossil, no record, only memory. And memory eventually disappears too. Scientists have developed astonishing techniques for recovering hidden clues. Ancient pollen trapped inside lake sediments reveals changing landscapes. Microscopic starch grains preserved on grinding stones identify forgotten foods. Chemical signatures locked within human bones provide clues about long-term diets. The evidence grows richer every year, yet never complete. Historians still argue passionately about many prehistoric food questions. Exactly when did certain regions begin relying heavily upon wild grains? How important were mushrooms in different climates? Did coastal communities ferment seafood more widely than inland groups? The debates continue, not because researchers lack skill, because the past rarely preserves complete answers. One particularly intriguing mystery involves medicinal plants. Archaeologists occasionally uncover evidence suggesting certain herbs may have been selected deliberately for healing rather than nutrition. Yet separating medicine from ordinary food proves remarkably difficult. Did people eat this plant because it tasted pleasant? Because it eased illness? Because tradition demanded it? Sometimes nobody can know. A curious discovery from recent decades has transformed archaeological thinking. Scientists analyzing ancient dental plaque have recovered microscopic remains of plants, fungi, smoke particles and food fibers trapped between teeth thousands of years ago. Ancient smiles, unexpected library. The smallest details become priceless. You pause beside the river, where children laugh while skipping smooth stones across the gently flowing water. Their cheerful voices echo through the afternoon air, reminding you that the ordinary moments of today often become the greatest mysteries of tomorrow. Future archaeologists might discover the stones, not the game. They may find discarded fish bones, not the jokes shared during supper. They might recover the fire pit, never the stories told beside it. History survives unevenly. That realization feels strangely comforting. As the sun begins descending toward the distant hills, everyone slowly returns to camp, carrying another day's modest harvest. The familiar path feels almost sacred now, knowing how little of these quiet journeys will remain after thousands of passing seasons. Back beside the evening fire, smoke curls upward into a sky, slowly filling with stars. The warm aroma of roasted roots, dried berries, herbs, and freshly caught fish drifts gently through the cool night air, while conversation flows easily among familiar faces. You look around the circle. Every laugh, every lesson, every careful warning could disappear. Yet somehow humanity's wisdom endured anyway. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough for future generations to keep asking questions. Enough for curious archaeologists to kneel beside ancient hearths with brushes and magnifying lenses. Enough for someone thousands of years later to wonder how the first humans learned what was safe to eat. Many answers have already emerged. Many remain buried beneath quiet forests, forgotten caves and ancient riverbanks, still waiting to share another small piece of the story. Tomorrow you will step back and see the entire journey from above. Every careful choice, every remembered lesson, every meal that quietly helped shape humanity itself. Section 19. The morning arrives beneath a perfectly clear sky. During the night, the rain clouds drifted away, leaving the air astonishingly crisp. Every distant hill stands sharply outlined against the pale blue horizon, while the first golden rays of sunlight spill gently across the valley below. Mist still lingers above the river, rising slowly like quiet breath from the sleeping earth, before disappearing into the warming morning. You stand upon a rocky overlook. For the first time you can see almost everything: the winding river, the familiar forest, the berry-filled meadows, the distant hills where hidden roots wait beneath the soil, the marshlands shimmering beyond the trees. Places that once felt separate now form a single landscape, a single memory, a single map, not one drawn with ink, one carried inside the human mind. Over the many days of your journey you have slowly gathered pieces of knowledge that once seemed unrelated. A bird showing where berries ripen, smoke transforming bitter roots into nourishing meals, elders sharing stories beside glowing fires, children learning through careful imitation, rivers offering fish only during particular seasons, travelers exchanging unfamiliar seeds across distant valleys. One lesson after another, one observation after another. Now they begin fitting together, like stars becoming a constellation. No single discovery allowed humanity to survive. Instead, thousands of small discoveries quietly connected until they became something far greater than their individual parts. A way of seeing. You begin walking down the hillside while cool morning air brushes gently against your face. The scent of pine needles mingles with flowering herbs warmed by the first sunlight, while birds greet the day with songs you now recognize almost instinctively. The forest has not changed. You have. The berry bush you pass no longer represents only fruit. It reminds you of these. The river no longer means only water. It speaks of migration. A patch of ordinary grass whispers about hidden roots sleeping beneath the earth. Every place carries several stories at once. Knowledge of this is knowledge layers itself quietly. Anthropologists often describe traditional ecological knowledge as a web rather than a list. Individual facts matter, but their true power emerges only through relationships. A certain flower blooms shortly before edible mushrooms appear. A particular bird arrives when fish begin their migration. The first cold nights sweeten hidden tubers beneath the soil. Nothing exists alone. The landscape thinks in connections. Human beings gradually learn to do the same. You notice a young child walking confidently ahead of the group. Only weeks ago, every unfamiliar plant inspired hesitation. Today, those small hands move naturally toward familiar leaves while avoiding dangerous lookalikes almost without conscious thought. Learning has become instinct. The transformation feels almost magical. Modern neuroscience offers an explanation. Repeated experience gradually shifts complex decisions away from slow, deliberate reasoning toward rapid pattern recognition. Ancient gatherers did not suddenly memorize thousands of isolated facts. Their brains reorganized themselves. Experience reshaped perception. The child no longer remembers every lesson individually. The forest simply looks different now. That may be one of humanity's greatest hidden achievements. Knowledge became vision. The morning path leads toward the river crossing where travelers visited only a few days ago. Their footprints have already begun fading beneath fresh wind and scattered rain. The visitors are gone. Their ideas remain. Perhaps someone in your own group will someday travel even farther, carrying familiar seeds into distant valleys while returning with stories of edible plants unknown to everyone waiting at home. Knowledge behaves remarkably like rivers, always moving, always growing. Researchers studying prehistoric migration increasingly recognize that ideas often spread far more quickly than entire populations. A successful tool design, an improved cooking technique, or a newly recognized food source might travel across neighboring communities through repeated encounters long before large numbers of people relocated permanently. Conversation becomes technology. Memory becomes infrastructure. No one notices. History quietly changes anyway. You pause beneath a towering oak tree whose broad branches have shaded countless generations before your arrival. Beneath its roots, children collect fallen acorns while several older adults begin sorting them into separate piles. Some will be eaten soon, others later. The smallest remain untouched. Every decision reflects dozens of earlier lessons. Perhaps acorns gathered after heavy rain require longer soaking to remove bitterness. Perhaps this particular hillside always produces sweeter nuts than another. Perhaps squirrels begin storing winter supplies a week before the first autumn frost. The observations accumulate. One season rarely teaches enough. 10 seasons teach much more. 50 seasons begin creating wisdom. Archaeologists sometimes describe humanity as a niche-building species. Instead of merely adapting to environments, people gradually transformed environments through accumulated knowledge. Trails became established routes. Gathering places became dependable seasonal destinations. Fire altered plant communities. Selective harvesting encouraged useful species. The landscape shaped people. People quietly reshaped landscapes. The relationship flowed both ways. By midday, warm sunlight fills the valley, while butterflies drift lazily between flowering shrubs. Bees continue their endless work among blossoms, just as they did long before humans first walked these paths. Nature remains patient. Human understanding slowly catches up. One elder kneels beside a smooth stone resting near the familiar stream. Hundreds of similar stones surround it, yet this one receives special attention. You finally understand why. It marks a place, not with words, with memory. This is where edible water plants appear after spring floods. This is where fish gather during late summer. This is where children first learn to recognize safe reeds. The stone itself says nothing. People give it meaning. Across the ancient world, landscapes became filled with invisible landmarks understood only by those who knew their stories. A particular tree, an unusual rock, a bend in the river. Each quietly anchored enormous amounts of ecological knowledge. The map existed inside human minds. The land simply held the reminders. Researchers still debate how prehistoric people mentally organized such astonishing amounts of environmental information. Some suggest storytelling provided the structure. Others emphasize repeated seasonal journeys or ritual practices. Perhaps all contributed. Human memory enjoys many pathways. One fascinating comparison comes from Indigenous Australian songlines, where songs encode remarkable geographical and ecological information across vast distances. Although these traditions developed much later than deep prehistory, they beautifully illustrate how oral cultures can preserve extraordinarily complex knowledge without written maps. Historians continue discussing how far similar systems may reach into humanity's distant past. The possibility remains deeply compelling. The afternoon slowly softens toward evening. Familiar gathering places welcome one final visit before everyone returns toward camp carrying another successful harvest. Nothing extraordinary happened today. That itself feels extraordinary. The meal waiting beside tonight's fire depends upon countless ordinary decisions repeated across generations. Notice the bird. Wait another week. Roast the root. Leave the youngest bulbs. Follow the river. Trust the elder. Teach the child. Share the story. None changes history alone. Together, they change everything. As sunset paints the western sky, with deep shades of amber and crimson, the familiar campfire comes alive once more. Sparks drift upward through cool evening air, while the comforting scents of roasted roots, smoked fish, fresh herbs, and toasted seeds surround everyone gathered nearby. You sit quietly beside the flames, looking around the circle, the children laughing, the elders smiling, the hunters repairing tools, the gatherers sorting tomorrow's baskets. You suddenly realize that every meal resting beside this fire represents an invisible map created over thousands of years, not a map of roads, a map of trust. Trust earned one careful observation at a time. Tomorrow, as your journey gently draws to its close, you will discover that perhaps humanity's greatest achievement was never simply learning what was safe to eat. It was learning how to remember, and how to pass that memory, into hands that had not yet been born. Section 20. The final morning arrives almost unnoticed. The forest greets the dawn exactly as it has every day before. Gentle birdsong drifts through the trees. A cool breeze carries the comforting fragrance of damp earth pine needles and the last traces of smoke rising from a fire that has faithfully watched over countless nights. Tiny beads of dew shimmer across the meadow, reflecting the first sunlight like scattered stars that somehow forgot to disappear with the darkness. Everything feels familiar now, wonderfully familiar. You pause beside the same path that once seemed so uncertain. The berry bushes no longer hide mysterious dangers behind every branch. The river no longer whispers only questions. Even the quiet forest beyond the trees has become something closer to an old friend than an unknown wilderness. Not because it has changed, because you have learned how to listen. When this journey began, every meal carried uncertainty. Every unfamiliar fruit demanded courage. Every root hidden beneath the soil represented a silent question with consequences no one wished to discover too quickly. Now looking back across these many mornings, you realize that humanity never solved that enormous challenge through one brilliant discovery. There was no single hero, no forgotten genius, no miraculous moment when the natural world suddenly revealed all of its secrets. Instead, thousands upon thousands of ordinary people quietly paid attention. A grandmother noticed that berries ripened earlier beside the southern hillside. A hunter remembered that fish returned after the first cool nights of autumn. A child learned to recognize one dangerous leaf because an older brother patiently compared it with another. A traveler carried unfamiliar seeds across distant valleys. An elder repeated one story beside one evening fire, again and again, until nobody remembered where the story had first begun. Knowledge grew that way, quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. Modern science often celebrates extraordinary discoveries, dramatic breakthroughs, and famous names. Yet the history of food safety began very differently. It belonged to countless anonymous people whose observations accumulated one careful meal at a time. No monuments bear their names. Every dinner owes them thanks. Archaeologists continue uncovering tiny fragments of their remarkable achievements. Burned seeds resting beneath ancient hearths, stone grinding tools polished smooth by thousands of patient hands, fish bones scattered beside forgotten rivers, microscopic grains of pollen preserved inside quiet lake sediments. Each discovery whispers, "We were here. We learned. We remembered." Yet perhaps the greatest evidence of all survives inside you. Not literally, but symbolically. Every time modern people instinctively recognize familiar foods, hesitate before eating unknown mushrooms, wash fresh vegetables, cook certain meats thoroughly, or pass family recipes from one generation to another, they participate in traditions stretching unimaginably far into humanity's past. The methods have changed. The habit of careful learning remains. You leave the campsite one final time, wandering slowly through the forest without urgency. Warm morning sunlight filters gently through towering branches, creating golden pools of light that drift across the ground whenever the breeze stirs the leaves overhead. A robin lands nearby. You smile. Once you would simply have admired the bird. Now you also wonder what it has been eating. Observation has become second nature. The forest feels alive with quiet conversations you never noticed before. The bees visiting familiar flowers, the squirrels carrying hidden acorns, the deer following ancient trails, the ravens circling high above distant meadows. Every creature continues reading the landscape in its own way. Humans simply learn to read alongside them. Not perfectly, never perfectly. Researchers still debate countless details surrounding prehistoric diets. New archaeological discoveries appear every year, sometimes confirming long-held ideas, sometimes gently overturning them. Ancient dental plaque reveals unexpected meals. Improved chemical analysis uncovers forgotten plants. Tiny fragments of preserved starch reshape familiar theories. The conversation continues. History remains wonderfully unfinished. Perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Some mysteries deserve patience. After all, patience carried humanity this far. You reach the familiar river one last time. The water flows with the same quiet determination it possessed when you first arrived. Sunlight dances across its surface while reeds sway gently along the muddy banks. Somewhere beneath those ripples, fish continue following migration routes older than memory itself. The river keeps moving. Knowledge does too. Nothing remains completely still. Children become elders. Students become teachers. Questions become traditions. Then traditions inspire new question. Humanity has always walked that gentle circle. You continue toward the open meadow where wildflowers now sway beneath the afternoon breeze. Butterflies drift from blossom to blossom with effortless grace while dragonflies skim just above the tall grasses glowing beneath the warm sun. Everything feels peaceful, not because danger disappeared, because understanding grew. The world was never truly divided into safe foods and dangerous ones. Instead, it offered relationships waiting to be discovered. Observe patiently. Compare carefully. Remember food. Faithfully. Share generously. Those simple habits transformed frightened foragers into remarkably successful survivors, capable of living in deserts, forests, mountains, frozen tundra, tropical islands, endless grasslands, and nearly every landscape the planet could offer. The greatest survival tool was never a spear, never fire alone, never even language by itself. It was shared memory, memory stretching across generations, Memory carried through, stories, laughter, mistakes, quiet walks, and countless ordinary meals. As the day slowly fades toward evening, you return once more to the familiar fire. Its warm glow feels softer tonight. The flames rise and fall with gentle rhythm while sparks drift upward into an increasingly dark sky. One by one, stars begin appearing above the silent treetops until the heavens seem filled with countless tiny lights watching peacefully over the sleeping earth. Around you, families finish their evening meal. Children grow sleepy. Quiet conversations fade. Someone gently adds another branch to the fire. The crackling wood answers softly. No one feels hurried. There is nowhere else to be. You have reached the end of a very long journey, and somehow, it feels less like an ending than a quiet homecoming. For these many days you have walked beside people whose names history forgot. You learned from hunters who never carved monuments, from gatherers who never wrote books, from elders whose wisdom travelled only as far as another listening heart. Yet together they accomplished something extraordinary. They built the first library of human survival. Not from paper, not from stones, not from stone, but from memory. And they handed that invisible library forward generation after generation until eventually, it reached you. Now allow the forest to grow quieter. Notice how the evening breeze has become wonderfully gentle, barely stirring the highest branches above your head. The fire has settled into a bed of glowing embers, each one pulsing softly beneath a blanket of pale grey ash. Somewhere in the distance, a single owl calls into the night before silence slowly returns to the valley. Take one last look at the stars reflected in the calm surface of the river. Listen to the peaceful chorus of insects hidden among the grasses. Feel the comforting warmth of the fire against your hands while the cool night air rests lightly upon your face. There is nothing more to gather tonight, nothing more to prove. The forest has shared its stories. The river has offered its lessons. The ancient paths have carried you safely home. Tomorrow another sunrise will find people searching, learning, remembering and sharing, just as they have for countless thousands of years. But for now you may simply rest beside the fading fire knowing that every careful meal, every patient observation and every quiet story helped shape the remarkable journey of humanity. The embers grow dimmer, the stars grow brighter, the night grows wonderfully still, and at last, sleep comes as gently as the ancient world itself.